when the weight of the world feels crushing, and the people around you seem to drain your very spirit. It's easy to feel trapped. Perhaps you've known that gnawing unease after a difficult conversation, the way certain individuals leave you feeling depleted, anxious, or even angry. You might find yourself replaying interactions in your mind, searching for what you could have done differently, or wishing desperately that others would simply change. This isn't just a fleeting discomfort. For many, it's a persistent source of stress, impacting relationships, work, and overall well-being. Modern life, with its constant demands and interconnectedness, often amplifies these challenges. We're told to communicate better, to set boundaries, to fix what's broken. Yet often, these well-intentioned efforts only lead to deeper frustration when faced with truly difficult personalities. The pervasive presence of what we often label toxic individuals can feel like a relentless storm. It's the demanding boss who undermines your confidence, the critical family member who chips away at your self-worth, or the friend who consistently brings drama and negativity into your life. You might recognize the patterns: manipulation, constant criticism, a lack of empathy, or an insatiable need for attention. These interactions leave us feeling not just tired, but fundamentally out of sync with ourselves. We might experience a racing heart, a knot in our stomach, or a persistent sense of dread when anticipating contact. The problem isn't just them, it's also the way we react, the way we internalize their behavior, and the emotional toll it takes. We often fall into the trap of believing we can, or even should, change these people, pouring our energy into a futile endeavor that leaves us exhausted and disheartened. This struggle is universal, not a sign of your personal failing. Many seek therapy, self-help books, or simply retreat, hoping to escape the relentless pressure. But what if there was another way? A path not of avoidance or confrontation, but of profound inner transformation. Imagine a stillness amidst the storm, a quiet strength that allows you to stand firm, unperturbed by the chaotic currents around you. For centuries, the ancient wisdom of Buddhism has offered just such a path, not a quick fix, but a deeply transformative journey towards inner peace and liberation. This isn't about adopting a new religion, but about embracing timeless principles that can radically alter your experience of life, especially in challenging relationships. We're not talking about passively accepting mistreatment, but about cultivating a profound inner resilience. This path invites us to explore concepts like letting go, recognizing that clinging to expectations and outcomes is a primary source of our suffering. It encourages mindfulness, teaching us to observe our reactions without immediate judgment, creating a vital space for wise response rather than habitual reaction. And it illuminates the path to awakened awareness, allowing us to see difficult situations and people not as external threats, but as opportunities for profound inner growth. Join us as we explore how these ancient teachings can empower you to navigate even the most challenging relationships, finding a profound sense of peace and lightness amidst life's inevitable complexities. When we talk about toxic people, our minds often conjure images of villains, individuals who intentionally seek to cause harm. We label them, categorize them, and often, in doing so, solidify our own suffering. But from a Buddhist perspective, the concept of toxic isn't about inherent evil in a person. Instead, It invites us to look deeper, to understand that unskillful actions and behaviors are rooted in suffering and delusion, not an inherent maliciousness of being. Imagine for a moment a raging fire. It burns. It destroys. It causes immense pain. Is the fire inherently evil, or is it simply acting according to its nature? A nature driven by fuel and oxygen. In a similar way, Buddhist teachings suggest that destructive behaviors, those we deem toxic, are like that fire. They are fueled by deeply ingrained patterns of suffering, dukkha, and ignorance, avidya. People act out of pain, fear, confusion, and attachment. When someone lashes out, criticizes relentlessly, manipulates, or spreads negativity, they are often caught in their own web of dissatisfaction, craving, and aversion. Their actions are a manifestation of their internal unrest, a desperate attempt to find a sense of control or ease. However misguided, this isn't to excuse harmful behavior or suggest that we should passively accept abuse. Far from it. But it's a crucial shift in perspective. Instead of seeing a toxic person, we begin to see a suffering being, caught in the grip of their own unskillful mental states. This distinction is vital. We distinguish between the person and their unskillful actions. The person, at their core, possesses the potential for awakening, for clarity, for compassion, just like everyone else. It is their actions, driven by delusion and defilements like greed, hatred, and ignorance, that create the toxicity we experience. When we recognize this, it disarms some of the emotional charge we might feel. It's no longer a personal attack from an evil entity, but rather the unfortunate manifestation of someone else's internal turmoil. Consider a person consumed by anger. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for conflict. Every word is laced with bitterness. From a conventional standpoint, we might label them an angry person and avoid them. From a Buddhist view, we'd see that their anger is a form of suffering. They are caught in a cycle of aversion, clinging to grievances, perhaps driven by deep-seated fears or past hurts. Their anger doesn't make them inherently bad. It makes them bound by their own mental afflictions. Our own projections and judgments also play a significant role here. How often do we enter an interaction with preconceived notions about someone? Based on past experiences or hearsay, we project our fears, our expectations, our interpretations onto them, and then react to that projection rather than to the reality of the present moment. This isn't just about others, it's about our own mind's tendencies to categorize and label, which can reinforce our suffering. A classic Buddhist story beautifully illustrates this concept. There once was a fierce and notorious bandit named Angulimala, who terrorized the countryside. His name meant finger garland because he wore a necklace made of the fingers of his victims. He was feared by all, and no one dared to approach him. One day, the Buddha, walking alone and unarmed, entered Angulimala's territory. Seeing him, Angulimala was enraged and decided to make the Buddha his next victim. He drew his sword and pursued the Buddha. But no matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up. The Buddha continued to walk at a steady, peaceful pace. Yet, Angulimala felt as if an invisible wall stood between them. Finally, panting and exhausted, Angulimala cried out, "Stop." "Ascetic, stop," the Buddha calmly replied. "I have stopped." Angulimala, It is you who have not stopped. Confused, Angulimala asked, "What do you mean? You are walking, and I am running." The Buddha looked at him with profound compassion and said, "I have stopped doing harm to living beings. I have stopped the cycle of craving and suffering. You, however, continue to run in the cycle of violence and misery. You have not stopped your unwholesome actions." In that moment, something shifted within Angulimala. The Buddha's calm presence and profound words pierced through his delusion. He saw not a judgment, but an invitation to cease his suffering. He laid down his sword, discarded his gruesome garland, and asked to become a monk. The Buddha, seeing his genuine remorse and readiness for change, accepted him. Angulimala later became a highly respected arahant enlightened one. This story is powerful because it shows that even the most toxic individual, one who has committed heinous acts, is not inherently evil. Angulimala was driven by delusion and a misguided path. The Buddha did not engage him with anger, fear, or judgment, but with unconditional compassion and clear wisdom. He saw beyond the actions to the suffering that fueled them. He understood that hatred is not overcome by hatred, but by love. This radical compassion, coupled with a deep understanding of the roots of suffering, allowed for a transformation that conventional approaches would deem impossible. This doesn't mean we should put ourselves in harm's way, or that we need to actively save everyone, but it changes our internal landscape. When we encounter someone who is behaving in a toxic manner, we can pause and ask ourselves, what suffering might be driving this person's actions? This question doesn't absolve them of responsibility, but it does shift our own internal state from reactive anger or fear to a more spacious understanding. It allows us to access a deeper well of wisdom and compassion within ourselves. Ultimately, understanding toxic from a Buddhist perspective is an invitation to cultivate discernment without judgment. We learn to recognize unskillful behaviors, to protect ourselves from their impact, and to set clear boundaries, all while holding a deeper understanding that the person acting out is, at some level, suffering. This foundational shift in perception is the first crucial step towards navigating challenging relationships with greater peace, wisdom, and inner freedom. Once we begin to see the roots of suffering in others, we are better equipped to respond skillfully rather than simply react, leading us naturally to the next crucial step, understanding and releasing our own need to control or change them. After gaining a deeper understanding of toxic behavior as a manifestation of suffering, the next crucial step on our Buddhist path to peace is perhaps one of the most challenging: relinquishing the illusion of control. We instinctively want to fix things, to make them better, especially when someone's behavior impacts us negatively. Our minds latch onto the idea that if only they would change, our suffering would cease. But this desire to control others is a significant source of our own frustration and unhappiness. Think about it. Have you ever truly succeeded in forcing someone to change against their will? You might have coerced them, manipulated them, or even shamed them into a temporary shift. But Shinuna, lasting change comes from within. When we try to dictate another person's thoughts, feelings, or actions, we are fighting against the fundamental nature of reality. Each individual is a sovereign being, shaped by their own karma, their own experiences, and their own unique path. Trying to reshape them according to our desires is like trying to mold water. It will always slip through our fingers, leaving us feeling powerless and exasperated. This brings us to a core Buddhist teaching: impermanence, anicca, and non-self anatta. Everything in existence is constantly changing. People change. Situations change. Our own feelings change. There is no fixed, unalterable self in anyone, just a continuous flow of experiences, thoughts, and feelings. When we try to pin someone down, to define them as this way or that way, and then try to force them into a different mold, we are denying the very impermanent nature of their being. Moreover, the concept of non-self extends to the idea that there is no separate, enduring self that we can manipulate or control. We are all interconnected, yet each distinct. Our attachment to the idea that we can, or should, control another person's journey fuels our own suffering. Our frustration often stems from our attachment to specific outcomes. We believe that if a difficult person would just stop doing X, or start doing Y, then we would finally be happy, peaceful, or respected. This clinging to an imagined future, where everything aligns with our desires, is the very definition of suffering in Buddhist terms. The Buddha taught that attachment tanha to desires, views, and existence is the root cause of suffering. When we are attached to the outcome of someone else changing, we hand over our peace of mind to them. Their behavior becomes the remote control for our emotions. This isn't liberation, it's self-imposed bondage. Instead of focusing on external control, the Buddhist path invites us to shift our focus to internal mastery. The only thing we truly have control over is our own mind, our own reactions, and our own actions. This isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about recognizing where our power truly lies. It's about channeling our energy inward, towards cultivating our own mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, rather than expending it fruitlessly on trying to change the unchangeable in others. This shift is profoundly empowering. When we let go of the need to change others, we reclaim our own agency. We become the architects of our own inner peace, regardless of the external circumstances. Consider the following analogy. Imagine a meticulous gardener who has a beautiful, vibrant water lily pond. She cherishes her lilies, admiring their delicate petals and the way they float serenely on the surface. One day, she travels to a desert landscape and finds herself captivated by a thorny, resilient cactus. She loves its unique shape and the way it thrives in such harsh conditions. However, she believes that if only this cactus could be more like her beloved water lilies, it would be even more beautiful. So, the gardener tries to help the cactus. She digs it up and tries to plant it in a pond. Surrounding it with water, she tries to give it rich, wet soil and regular downpours. She becomes increasingly frustrated as the cactus struggles, its spines becoming brittle, its vibrant green fading to a sickly yellow. She scolds it for not blooming like a water lily, for not adapting to the environment she believes is best for it. She pours more water, more effort, more frustration into this futile endeavor, convinced that the problem lies with the cactus, not with her expectations. The cactus, of course, cannot become a water lily. It is inherently a desert plant, designed to thrive in arid conditions, drawing sustenance from minimal moisture and harsh sunlight. Its beauty lies in its resilience and its unique adaptation to its own environment. The gardener's suffering arises not from the cactus itself, but from her attachment to the idea that the cactus should be something it is not. Her desire to control its nature, to force it into a form alien to its being, leads only to her own disappointment and the plant's distress. This gardener is like us when we try to change a toxic person. We have an ideal image of how they should behave, how they should speak, how they should interact. We pour our energy into trying to manipulate them into fitting our mold. We get frustrated when they don't respond as we wish, when they continue to exhibit the very behaviors we find difficult. We blame them, we resent them, and we suffer because we are clinging to an illusion of control over something that is fundamentally beyond our power. The wisdom of this analogy is profound. Just as the cactus cannot become a water lily, a person deeply entrenched in certain patterns of behavior, fueled by their own suffering and ignorance, cannot be forced into immediate, radical change by our will alone. Their path, their lessons, their transformations are their own. Our role is not to be the frustrated gardener, but to be the mindful observer, recognizing the true nature of the plant before us. Releasing the need to change others doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior. It doesn't mean becoming a doormat or allowing others to exploit us. It simply means that our strategy shifts. Instead of trying to fix them, we focus on fixing our response. Instead of demanding that they be different, we cultivate the inner strength and wisdom to interact with them skillfully, or even to distance ourselves, if necessary, without losing our own peace. This powerful act of letting go frees up an immense amount of mental and emotional energy. Imagine the relief of no longer carrying the burden of someone else's supposed transformation. When we release this need, we create space. Space for acceptance, space for compassion for ourselves and for them, and space for genuinely wise action. This freedom from the exhausting struggle of external control allows us to cultivate our own inner garden, tending to our own peace and well-being, which is the only true control we possess. Once we liberate ourselves from this illusion, we are ready to cultivate the present moment awareness that allows us to respond with wisdom rather than simply reacting to the chaos. Having understood that true freedom comes from letting go of the need to control others, we now turn to a vital practice that enables this liberation, cultivating mindfulness. In the face of challenging interactions, our natural tendency is to react instantaneously. Someone says something hurtful, and immediately, anger flares, defensiveness arises, or sadness overwhelms us. These reactions are often automatic, born from deeply ingrained habits and emotional triggers. Mindfulness offers us a radical alternative, the ability to pause, to observe our internal experience without immediate judgment or engagement. At its core, mindfulness is simply present moment awareness. Coupled with a non-judgmental attitude, it's about paying attention, on purpose, to the thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations that are arising right now, without getting swept away by them. When a difficult person enters the room, or a harsh word is spoken, our minds can instantly spiral into rumination, planning counterattacks, or sinking into despair. Mindfulness is the practice of noticing that spiral beginning and gently, but firmly, redirecting our attention back to the present. It's like standing on the bank of a river, watching the currents flow by, rather than jumping in and being carried downstream. This space between stimulus and response is where our true freedom lies. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This profound insight is at the heart of Buddhist practice. When we are mindful, we create that space. Instead of immediately reacting with anger, fear, or withdrawal, we can notice the anger arising, feel the heat in our chest, observe the thought, "How dare they?" and then consciously choose how to respond. This pause, even if it's just a fraction of a second, is revolutionary. It breaks the chain of habitual reaction and allows wisdom to emerge. So, how do we practically cultivate this pause? Breath awareness is a powerful and accessible tool. When you feel triggered or sense tension rising in an interaction, simply bring your attention to your breath. Feel the inhale, feel the exhale. Notice the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. This simple anchor helps to ground you in the present moment, pulling your attention away from the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. You don't need to change your breath, just observe it. Another technique is a quick body scan. Notice where you feel the emotion in your body. Is it a tightening in your jaw, tension in your shoulders, a knot in your stomach? By bringing conscious awareness to these physical sensations, you acknowledge the emotion without being consumed by it. This externalization helps you to observe the emotion rather than being the emotion. Mindfulness also helps us to recognize our triggers and habitual patterns of reaction. Perhaps you always become defensive when criticized, or shut down when confronted. Through mindful observation, you begin to see these patterns play out. There's my defensiveness arising again. You might think, this recognition, without self-blame, is the first step towards changing the pattern. It's like seeing the same old movie playing out. But this time, you're not just a character in it, you're also the audience, observing the plot. This awareness gives you the power to choose a different ending. Let me share a story that beautifully illustrates the power of mindfulness in creating this crucial pause. There once was a young, earnest monk who lived by a raging river. The river was known for its powerful currents, its unpredictable eddies, and its treacherous waters. Many travelers attempted to cross it, only to be swept away by its force. The monk, deeply committed to his practice, would sit by the riverbank each day, observing. One day, a respected master came to visit the monastery. He saw the young monk sitting by the river, his gaze steady. "What are you doing?" "My son," the master asked. "I am learning from the river." "Master," replied the monk, "I see its immense power, its ceaseless flow, how it carries everything away." "And what have you learned?" the master inquired. "I have learned that if I jump into its currents, I will be lost." The monk said, "But if I stand on the bank, I can observe its power without being swept away. I can watch the debris, the leaves, the branches, even whole trees being carried downstream. Yet I remain unmoved." The master smiled. "Indeed. And what does this teach you about your mind?" The monk pondered for a moment. "It teaches me that my thoughts and emotions are like the river's currents. They can be powerful, turbulent, and seem to carry me away. But if I can stand on the bank of my awareness, if I can simply observe them without judgment or entanglement, then I remain rooted in my own peace, unshaken by the internal storms. The master nodded. Precisely. Many people are like those who jump blindly into the river of their emotions. They are swept away by anger, craving, fear, and resentment. But the mindful one learns to stand on the bank, to witness the flow of their inner experience. Recognizing its impermanent nature, they do not cling to the calm waters, nor do they fight the turbulent ones. They simply observe, and in that observation, they find their stability. This monk's realization is the essence of cultivating mindfulness. When a toxic person unleashes a torrent of negativity, our minds often jump into that river. We engage with every word, every accusation, every emotional hook. We become angry with them, hurt by them, or defensive against them. In doing so, we are swept away by the current of their negativity and our own reactive emotions. Mindfulness trains us to be the monk on the bank. When the critical comment comes, we notice the immediate tightening in our chest. We observe the flash of anger, the thought, "How dare they say that to me?" We don't suppress these reactions, nor do we immediately act on them. We simply acknowledge them. Anger is here. A thought of defensiveness has arisen. By naming it, by witnessing it, we create that vital space. In that space, we are no longer just reacting, we are responding. We can choose to take a deep breath, to let the words pass without engaging, to respond with a calm question rather than an angry retort, or even to simply walk away. This practice is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming skillful with emotions. It's about recognizing that our feelings are transient visitors, not permanent residents. When we become mindful, we reclaim our autonomy. We become the conscious choosers of our actions, rather than being mere puppets of our triggers. This consistent practice of pausing before reacting transforms our relationship not only with others, but, more importantly, with ourselves. It lays the groundwork for understanding our deeper vulnerabilities, which is the next crucial step in our journey towards inner peace. Having cultivated the vital pause through mindfulness, we now turn the gaze inward. This is arguably one of the most courageous steps on the Buddhist path to navigating challenging relationships, understanding how difficult interactions often serve as a mirror, revealing our own unhealed wounds, insecurities, or unresolved patterns. It's easy to point fingers, to identify the toxic person as the sole source of discomfort, but Buddhist wisdom invites us to look beyond the surface, recognizing that our reactions often stem from our own internal landscape. This concept ties into the idea of shadow aspects and projections. In psychology, the shadow refers to the unconscious parts of our personality that we tend to suppress or deny, often because we perceive them as negative or undesirable. When we encounter qualities in others that trigger a strong negative reaction in us, excessive pride, perceived weakness, aggression, neediness, it's worth pausing to consider if these are reflections of something we are unwilling to acknowledge within ourselves. We project these disowned parts onto others, making them the bad guy, so we don't have to confront our own discomfort. It's not always a one-to-one correspondence, but the intensity of our reaction can often be a clue. The more vehemently we judge something in another, the more likely it is that a similar seed lies within us, perhaps unacknowledged or underdeveloped. Furthermore, Challenging relationships are incredibly effective at pushing our emotional buttons. Each of us has these sensitive spots, areas where we feel particularly vulnerable, insecure, or triggered. Perhaps it's a deep-seated fear of abandonment that gets activated when someone pulls away, or a feeling of worthlessness that surfaces with criticism, or a need for control that erupts when things feel chaotic. Toxic individuals, often unconsciously, have a knack for pressing these very buttons, activating old hurts or core insecurities that we might not even be consciously aware of. The intense emotional reaction we experience is often less about the current situation and more about the historical pain it echoes. This is where the practice of self-inquiry becomes paramount. What is this situation teaching me about myself? When you feel a surge of anger, ask, what belief about myself or the world is being challenged right now? If you feel deeply hurt by a comment, inquire, what part of me believes that comment is true, or fears it might be true? This isn't about blaming yourself for someone else's behavior. It's about recognizing that you have a choice in how you respond. By understanding why you react in a certain way, you begin to dismantle the power the trigger holds over you. It's about taking ownership of your emotional well-being, understanding that while others may initiate an interaction, your internal response is ultimately your responsibility. This insight empowers you to step out of the victim role and into a position of conscious choice. Let me share a simple, yet profound, story to illustrate this concept. There once was a young monastic student who was constantly complaining about his fellow students. He found one too loud, another too lazy, a third too gossipy, and a fourth too arrogant. He went to his Zen master, filled with frustration. "Master," he lamented, "I find it so difficult to practice here. Everyone around me seems to have so many flaws, their constant noise, their laziness, their incessant chatter, their arrogance. It disturbs my meditation and makes me lose my peace. How can I find enlightenment amidst such imperfections?" The master listened patiently, a faint smile playing on his lips. He then led the student to a nearby pond, whose surface was muddied by recent rain. "Look into the pond, my son," the master instructed. The student peered into the murky water. "I see only a cloudy, indistinct réflexion. Master, it is so unclear." The master then picked up a handful of small pebbles and began to gently drop them into the pond. One by one, each pebble stirred the mud at the bottom, making the water even cloudier. "Do you see now?" the master asked. "Yes, Master. It is even muddier than before. I can see nothing clearly." The master then sat down by the pond and simply waited. He did nothing, said nothing, just sat in quiet contemplation. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the mud began to settle. The water gradually became clearer, reflecting the sky and the trees with increasing sharpness. After some time, when the surface was still and clear, the master gestured to the pond. "Look again, my son." The student looked, and this time, he saw a perfectly clear reflection of his own face looking back at him. The master then spoke softly. "When your mind is disturbed, agitated by the flaws of others, it is like this muddy pond, your own inner turmoil, your own judgments, your own unexamined discomforts. Stir up the water, preventing you from seeing clearly. What you perceive as flaws in others often stems from the mud within your own mind. The irritation, The anger, the frustration you feel is not solely their doing, it is your reaction, filtered through your own unresolved issues. Just as the pond eventually settled when left undisturbed, so too will your mind become clear when you cease to stir it with judgment and projection, when you truly look at your own reflection, when you understand the mud within yourself. Then the flaws of others will no longer disturb your peace so profoundly. The clarity you seek is not in changing the pond, but in letting your own inner waters settle. This story holds profound truth for dealing with toxic people. When we find ourselves constantly reacting to someone, feeling triggered by their behavior, the Buddhist path encourages us to turn the mirror towards ourselves. What is it within us that is being agitated? Is it a need for validation that is unmet? A fear of not being heard? A belief that we must always be in control? An old wound of betrayal or abandonment that is being reopened? For instance, if someone's arrogance deeply bothers you, it might be worth exploring if there's a part of you that fears inadequacy, or perhaps even a suppressed desire for recognition that you judge in yourself. If someone's constant complaining infuriates you, perhaps there's an inner critic within you that you are projecting, or a deep aversion to victimhood that stems from your own struggles. Taking responsibility for our emotional landscape is not about self-blame. It's about empowerment. It's about recognizing that while we cannot control the external stimulus, we absolutely can control our internal response. By understanding our own vulnerabilities, our own buttons, and the mud that stirs within our own minds, we can begin to heal those areas. When those areas are healed, the toxic behavior of others loses its power to disrupt our inner peace. The comments may still be made, the behaviors may still occur, but our internal reaction transforms. We become less easily rattled, less personally offended, and more capable of responding with wisdom rather than automatic reaction. This deep self-awareness, fostered by self-inquiry, becomes a foundation for true self-compassion, which is the vital next step in our journey. Having gained insight into our own vulnerabilities and learned to pause before reacting, we now come to one of the most transformative and counterintuitive practices in Buddhism for navigating difficult relationships, cultivating metta, or loving kindness. Our natural inclination when faced with someone we perceive as toxic is to recoil, to feel anger, resentment, or aversion. While these feelings are understandable, clinging to them ultimately harms us more than the other person. Metta meditation offers a powerful antidote to a way to transform these corrosive emotions into something liberating. What exactly is metta? It's far more than just a warm, fuzha feeling. Metta is benevolent friendliness, goodwill, and wishing well-being for all beings. Starting with ourselves, it is a radical openness of the heart, an active desire for happiness and freedom from suffering for others, regardless of their actions. It doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior or putting ourselves in dangerous situations. It means recognizing the shared humanity and potential for suffering in all beings, including those who cause us pain. The core insight of metta is that extending compassion, even to those who seem least deserving, is a path to our own liberation from the burden of resentment and ill will. The practice of metta typically follows a progression designed to systematically expand our circle of compassion towards oneself. We begin by directing loving kindness inwards. This is crucial because if we cannot offer ourselves compassion, it's difficult to genuinely offer it to others. We wish ourselves freedom from suffering, well-being, and happiness. Phrases like "may I be free from suffering" May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease and peace are often used. This step helps to heal our own inner wounds and build a foundation of self-acceptance towards loved ones. Once we feel a genuine sense of metta for ourselves, we extend it to those we dearly love, family, close friends, pets. This is usually easier as our hearts naturally open to them. Towards neutral people next. We broaden our circle to include people we encounter regularly, but for whom we feel no strong emotion, positive or negative, a cashier, a delivery person, a fellow commuter. This helps to break down the barriers of indifference towards difficult people. This is often the most challenging, yet most profound stage. We bring to mind the toxic individual, the one who causes us distress, and then, intentionally, we wish them well. We might use phrases like may, name of person, be free from suffering. May name of person, be happy. May name of person, be healthy. May name of person, live with ease and peace. It's vital to understand that practicing metta towards a difficult person is not condoning their behavior. It is not saying, what you did was okay. It is not about pretending they are suddenly wonderful. Instead, it is an act of profound self-preservation when we hold on to anger, resentment, and a desire for retribution. Those emotions poison our internal landscape. They are like carrying hot coals, intending to throw them at someone else, but burning ourselves in the process by wishing them well. We release our grip on those harmful emotions. We acknowledge that their unskillful actions stem from their own suffering and ignorance, and by wishing them freedom from that suffering, we are simultaneously wishing ourselves freedom from the suffering of hating them. The physiological and psychological benefits of cultivating loving kindness are well documented by modern science. Studies have shown that metta meditation can reduce stress, alleviate depression and anxiety, increase positive emotions, enhance empathy, and even improve physical health indicators. When our hearts are filled with benevolence, our bodies respond by calming the nervous system, reducing inflammatory responses, and promoting a sense of well-being. This isn't just spiritual feel-good, it's tangible, measurable benefit. By consciously choosing to generate feelings of goodwill, we are literally rewiring our brains for greater resilience and happiness. One of the most powerful teachings of the Buddha regarding dealing with harm is encapsulated in the simile of the So Kakakupama Sutta. This teaching is radical in its approach to enduring suffering with unwavering compassion. The Buddha was addressing his monks, warning them against engaging in quarrels and resentment. He then presented a hypothetical, extreme scenario: monks. Even if bandits were to savagely sever you limb by limb with a two-handled saw, whoever of you harbors ill will in his mind on that account would not be one who practices my teaching. In that case, you should train yourselves. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness. Without inner hate, we shall keep pervading them with a mind imbued with loving kindness. And starting with them, we shall keep pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, expansive, limitless, free from hostility, free from ill will. This teaching is not meant to be taken literally as an instruction to endure physical torture without resistance. Rather, It is an extreme metaphor to impress upon the monks the absolute necessity of cultivating inner loving kindness and equanimity, even in the face of immense provocation and suffering. The bandits with the saw represent the most extreme form of toxic behavior or harm imaginable. The Buddha's point is that even in such an unthinkable situation, the mind of the practitioner should remain free from hate, resentment, or ill will. Why? Because harboring these negative emotions, even against those who cause us harm, ultimately destroys our own inner peace and binds us to the cycle of suffering. The profound message here is that your peace is paramount. The toxic person's actions are their karma, but your reaction is your karma. By choosing to cultivate metta, you are choosing to break the chain of suffering. You are choosing not to allow their negativity to define your internal state. This doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you continue to expose yourself to harm. It means that internally, you release the burden. For example, if you have a colleague who constantly gossips and spreads rumors about you, your initial reaction might be anger and a desire for revenge. You might spend hours ruminating on how to expose them or get them fired. This internal turmoil consumes your energy, affects your sleep, and degrades your own sense of well-being. Practicing metta towards this colleague would mean acknowledging their suffering. Perhaps they gossip due to insecurity or a need for attention, and then intentionally wishing them well. May colleague's name be free from the suffering that causes them to gossip. May they find true happiness and ease. This doesn't magically make them stop gossiping, but it fundamentally changes your internal experience. It loosens the grip of resentment, allowing you to respond with greater clarity and less emotional charge. You can then skillfully set boundaries or disengage from the toxic dynamic without being consumed by internal bitterness. The practice of metta is a courageous act of spiritual alchemy. It takes the lead of our pain and transforms it into the gold of compassion and inner freedom. It is the active choice to cultivate peace within ourselves, regardless of the chaos outside. By releasing the internal prison of resentment, we open ourselves up to the next vital step, skillfully setting boundaries and communicating with wisdom, all while maintaining that hard-won compassion, having cultivated inner peace through mindfulness and loving kindness. The next crucial step is to translate that internal shift into external interaction. This involves the practice of wise speech and skillful action, setting healthy boundaries with compassion. It's a common misconception that being compassionate means passively enduring mistreatment. In Buddhist teachings, true compassion includes wisdom, and wisdom often dictates protecting one's well-being and preventing further harm for both oneself and, sometimes, even for the other person involved. The Buddha's teachings on right speech provide an invaluable framework for navigating challenging conversations. Right speech isn't merely about being polite. It's about speaking in a way that is truthful. Is what you are saying accurate and factual? Or is it based on assumptions, rumors, or emotional projections? Kind, benevolent. Is your intention to cause harm or to foster understanding and well-being? Even difficult truths can be delivered with kindness, beneficial, helpful. Will your words lead to a positive outcome, clarity, or resolution? Or will they escalate conflict and suffering? Timely, is this the right moment to speak? Are both parties receptive? Or is the emotional climate too charged? Applying these principles to setting boundaries means communicating your needs and limits with clarity, firmness, and a foundation of inner calm. It's about recognizing that assertion is not aggression. Aggression aims to dominate, blame, or punish. Assertion, on the other hand, is about clearly stating your truth and your needs without infringing on the rights of others. It stems from self-respect and a desire for healthy relating, not from anger or a need for control. When you assert a boundary, you're not trying to change the other person, but rather to change the dynamic of your interaction with them. So, what are some practical strategies for expressing needs and limits? Clearly and calmly use I statements. Instead of saying, "You always interrupt me, and it's so rude," try, "I feel unheard when I'm interrupted, and I need to finish my thought." This takes the focus off blame and centers it on your experience. Be specific. Vague complaints lead to confusion. Instead of "You're so negative," say, "When you talk about X, I notice I start to feel drained, and I need to step away from that conversation." State your boundary clearly and concisely. "I will not discuss X topic with you," or "I can only stay for another 15 minutes. Or if you raise your voice, "I will need to end this conversation." Follow through. This is crucial. A boundary without consistent follow-through is just an empty threat. If you say you'll end a call if they shout, then gently, but firmly, end the call if they shout. Your actions reinforce your words. Practice active listening if appropriate. Sometimes, a difficult person is acting out because they feel unheard. While you don't need to accept their behavior, acknowledging their feelings, e.g., "I hear you're frustrated, and I understand that. However, I still need to," can sometimes de-escalate tension before you state your boundary. However, if the person is truly toxic and manipulative, engaging in prolonged listening might not be skillful. Crucially, knowing when to disengage or create physical distance is also a vital, skillful action. Not every situation requires a direct confrontation or a verbal boundary. Sometimes, the most compassionate action, for yourself and potentially for the other person, is to simply remove yourself from the harmful dynamic. This could mean minimizing contact, if possible, reduce the frequency or duration of interactions, creating physical space, literally stepping away, leaving the room, or avoiding certain environments where the person is present, ending conversations, politely but firmly stating, "I need to go now," or "I'm not able to continue this conversation," and then disengaging, blocking contact in extreme cases. For truly abusive or relentlessly harmful individuals, completely cutting off communication may be the most skillful and compassionate choice for your well-being. This is not about being rude or abandoning someone. It's about recognizing that you are responsible for your own peace, and that continually exposing yourself to harmful energy can erode your well-being. Let me offer an anecdote that highlights the wisdom of setting boundaries, not with aggression, but with clear and unwavering resolve. There once was a village known for its beautiful, lush gardens. However, these gardens were constantly plagued by wild animals from the surrounding forest, who would come and devour the crops. The villagers tried everything, shouting, throwing stones, chasing the animals away, but the animals would always return. Bolder than before, the villagers grew exhausted and disheartened, their efforts seemingly futile. One day, a wise elder from a neighboring village visited. She observed the villagers struggle and listened to their complaints. "You are trying to change the nature of the wild animals," she said gently. "You cannot stop them from being hungry, nor can you force them to understand your rules. Their nature is to seek food where they find it." The villagers despaired. "So, we are doomed to lose our crops forever." The elder smiled. "Not at all. You do not need to change the animals. You need to change your interaction with them, instead of fighting them directly, which only exhausts you and teaches them little. Build a strong, impenetrable fence around your gardens." The villagers were skeptical. "A fence, but they are so clever. A sturdy fence." The elder emphasized, "One that clearly defines where your garden begins and where the wild forest ends. It should be built not with anger, but with resolve. When an animal comes to the fence, it will learn that it cannot enter this space. It will then seek food elsewhere, according to its nature, and your garden will flourish in peace." The villagers, though hesitant, followed her advice. They painstakingly built strong fences, not out of malice towards the animals, but out of a clear intention to protect their sustenance and well-being. Indeed, the animals eventually learned. They still roamed the forest, but they no longer invaded the village gardens. The gardens thrived, and the villagers found peace, no longer needing to constantly fight or despair. This analogy beautifully encapsulates the essence of setting boundaries with toxic people. The wild animals represent individuals whose behaviors are driven by their own internal hunger, perhaps for attention, control, validation, or relief from their own suffering. Trying to shout at them, throw stones of blame, or chase them away with arguments is often futile and exhausting. It attempts to change their fundamental nature or deeply ingrained patterns. A strong, impenetrable fence represents the clear, consistent boundaries we establish. This fence is built not with anger or resentment, but with resolve and self-compassion. It defines where your garden, your emotional, mental, and physical space begins, and where the wild forest, the other person's unskillful behavior ends. When you calmly state, "I cannot participate in conversations that involve gossip," or "I will not tolerate shouting," you are building that fence. The key is that the fence is about your space and your well-being. It's not about controlling the animal, the other person, but controlling access to your garden. When the animal encounters this clear boundary repeatedly and consistently, it will eventually learn that this is a space where its usual behaviors are not permitted. It may then move on, or at least change its approach when interacting with you. This practice of wise speech and skillful action is an embodiment of compassion. Compassion for yourself in protecting your energy, and even a subtle compassion for the other person, as you are not enabling their unskillful behavior to continue unchecked in your presence. It moves us from a reactive stance to one of proactive, mindful self-preservation, and leads us naturally to the deeper understanding of detachment. Having learned to set skillful boundaries, we arrive at a subtle yet profound concept in Buddhist practice: the difference between detachment and indifference, and how true freedom lies in non-attachment. Often, when people hear detachment, they fear it implies becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally distant. This is a common misunderstanding. Buddhist detachment is not about ceasing to care. It's about releasing the clinging, the grasping, and the intense identification with outcomes that cause us suffering. It's about letting go of the story we've created around toxic people, and finding an inner balance. To be indifferent is to lack interest, sympathy, or concern. It's a state of apathy, a shutting down of emotions. This is not what Buddhist detachment advocates. Indifference can be just as much a form of suffering, a way of avoiding genuine engagement with life and its challenges. It builds walls around the heart, preventing us from experiencing the richness of connection and compassion. Detachment, in the Buddhist sense, is about non-attachment. It's about recognizing that all phenomena, including people and relationships, are impermanent and constantly changing. It's about not clinging to specific expectations, outcomes, or even identities. When we are attached, we suffer because reality inevitably deviates from our desires. We cling to the idea of a perfect relationship, a fixed personality, or a specific way things should be. When the toxic person fails to meet these attachments, we experience pain, frustration, and disappointment. Detachment, therefore, is the practice of letting go of this clinging. One powerful aspect of this is letting go of the story we create around toxic people. Our minds are narrative-generating machines. When someone repeatedly causes us distress, we build a complex story about them. They are always manipulative. They deliberately try to hurt me. They'll never change. While there may be elements of truth in these narratives, holding on to them rigidly binds us. This story becomes a filter through which we interpret every interaction, often confirming our biases and fueling our resentment. Non-attachment invites us to see the person as they are in the present moment, rather than through the lens of our accumulated narratives and past grievances. It doesn't mean forgetting past actions, but it does mean releasing the emotional charge tied to those memories. This practice leads directly to equanimity, upekkha, remaining balanced amidst life's ups and downs. Equanimity is a state of mind that is not swayed by the 8 worldly conditions: gain and loss, honor and dishonor, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. When we cultivate equanimity, the toxic person's criticisms don't send us into a spiral of self-doubt. Their praise doesn't inflate our ego. We learn to meet both pleasant and unpleasant experiences with an even-minded, stable awareness. This doesn't mean we don't feel emotions. It means we don't get swept away by them. We acknowledge the feeling, but we don't identify with it or allow it to dictate our actions. The profound result of non-attachment and equanimity is reduced suffering and increased inner peace. When we stop clinging to how others should be and how situations should unfold, we free ourselves from a huge source of discontent. We begin to experience a lightness, a spaciousness in our being that is independent of external circumstances. This is the true meaning of inner freedom, a peace that cannot be disturbed by the actions of others because it is sourced from within. Here's an analogy that often helps clarify the concept of non-attachment. Imagine a surfer riding a powerful ocean wave. The wave is dynamic, unpredictable, and full of immense energy. The surfer doesn't try to control the wave itself. They don't try to make the wave bigger or smaller, faster or slower, or force it to break in a specific way. If they were to cling desperately to the wave, trying to force it to their will, they would quickly lose their balance, wipe out, and be dragged under by its force. Their attachment to controlling the wave would lead to their suffering. Instead, the skillful surfer understands the impermanent nature of the wave. They flow with its energy, adapting to its changes. They commit fully to riding it, engaging with it with skill and attention. But they also know that eventually, the wave will crest and dissolve. They don't cling to the perfect ride, nor do they resent the wipeouts. Their goal is not to control the ocean, but to gracefully navigate it. They engage fully in the experience, but they are also ready to let go when the wave breaks, preparing for the next one without attachment to the last. Now, consider a toxic person or a challenging relationship as a powerful wave. Our natural inclination is often to try and control this wave. We want the person to behave differently, to conform to our expectations, to stop creating turbulent interactions. We cling to the idea that if only this wave would be calmer, then our ride would be smooth and enjoyable. This clinging, this desperate attempt to control an external force, is precisely what leads us to wipe out emotionally. We get dragged under by resentment, frustration, and anger. Detachment in this analogy is like the surfer's attitude. It is not about ignoring the wave or becoming indifferent to its power. The surfer is fully present, fully aware of the wave's nuances. Similarly, we are fully present in our interactions, aware of the dynamics and our own reactions. But we don't try to control the wave, the other person's behavior. We don't cling to the idea that this particular wave must give us a perfect ride. When the toxic person begins their familiar pattern, perhaps a critical remark or a manipulative maneuver, our mind, if unattached, observes it like the surfer observes a breaking part of the wave. We notice it, we acknowledge its presence, but we don't desperately try to force it back into a perfect shape. We don't cling to the hope that this time it will be different. We release that expectation. This allows us to practice non-clinging to the story of the wave. The surfer doesn't carry the narrative of this wave is always bad, or I always fall on this type of wave. They meet each wave afresh. In the same way, we try to meet each interaction with a toxic person with fresh eyes, rather than through the heavy filter of past hurts and preconceived notions. The result is equanimity. Just as the skillful surfer maintains a balanced posture, whether the wave is smooth or choppy, we cultivate an inner stability that is not easily disturbed by the ups and downs of the interaction. We can engage, respond skillfully, or disengage, all while maintaining an internal calm. We are engaged in life, but not bound by its fluctuations. This detachment is not uncaring. The surfer cares about riding the wave well, about the experience, but they don't cling to the wave itself. Similarly, we can care about maintaining healthy relationships, about clarity, and about our own well-being, without clinging to the illusion of control over others. This profound understanding of non-attachment is a cornerstone of liberation, allowing us to walk through the world with a lightness of being, preparing us for the next step, integrating all these teachings into a holistic approach. We've explored several powerful Buddhist concepts, individually understanding the roots of suffering in others, letting go of control, pausing with mindfulness, recognizing our own vulnerabilities, cultivating loving kindness, and setting wise boundaries with non-attachment. Now, it's time to weave these threads together and see how they are all integrated within the framework of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha's practical guide to liberation. This path isn't a series of separate steps to be completed one by one, but rather a holistic system where each element supports and enriches the others, offering a comprehensive strategy for navigating challenging relationships. The Eightfold Path is comprised of right understanding, samaditthi. This is the foundational wisdom, seeing things as they truly are. In the context of toxic relationships, it means understanding the Four Noble Truths, that suffering exists. It has a cause, craving and clinging. It can cease, and there is a path to its cessation. It means understanding that others' unskillful actions stem from their own suffering and ignorance, rather than inherent malice. It's the wisdom that allows us to distinguish between the person and their behavior, and to recognize the impermanence of all phenomena, including difficult dynamics. Right thought samma sankappa. This refers to thoughts of renunciation, loving kindness, and non-violence. When dealing with challenging people, right thought means cultivating intentions of compassion and non-harm, rather than thoughts of anger, revenge, or blame. It's the inner resolve to meet difficulty with a mind free from ill will. As we practice with metta, it shapes our internal landscape, setting the stage for how we interact. Right speech samavaka. We've already touched upon this, speaking truthfully, kindly, beneficially, and at the right time, in the context of toxic interactions. This is crucial for setting boundaries with clarity and compassion. It means choosing words that de-escalate rather than inflame, and knowing when silence is more skillful than speaking. It's about communicating your needs and limits without aggression or passive aggressiveness. Right action samma kamanta. This involves ethical conduct, refraining from actions that cause harm. When facing toxic behaviors, right action means protecting yourself without causing harm to others. This could involve physical distancing, removing yourself from volatile situations, or taking legal steps if necessary. It's about ensuring your actions are driven by wisdom and compassion, not by reactive anger or spite. Right livelihood, samma ajiva, while primarily about earning a living in an ethical way. In a broader sense, it means aligning your daily life and environment with your values. If a significant relationship or work situation is consistently causing immense suffering and is truly detrimental to your well-being despite applying all other tools, right livelihood might involve making difficult choices to change your environment, finding ways to minimize exposure, or even, in extreme cases, disengaging entirely from situations that compromise your inner peace. It's about maintaining integrity in your life choices. Right effort, samma vayama. This is the active cultivation of wholesome states and the abandonment of unwholesome ones. When dealing with difficult people, right effort means actively working to prevent anger, resentment, or fear from arising in your mind. It means diligently cultivating patience, compassion, and equanimity. It's the ongoing work of turning away from negative mental states and nurturing positive ones. As we discussed in understanding our vulnerabilities, right mindfulness samma sati. This is the sustained attention to the present moment, observing thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment. This is our pause button, the ability to be aware of our triggers and reactions as they arise, creating the space to choose a skillful response rather than acting out of habit. It's the practice of witnessing the inner turmoil without becoming the turmoil, allowing us to detach without becoming indifferent. Right concentration, samma samadhi. This refers to developing deep states of meditative absorption, leading to mental stability and clarity. While this often involves formal meditation practice, in daily life, it means cultivating a focused and steady mind, one that is not easily distracted or overwhelmed by external chaos or internal chatter. A concentrated mind is less susceptible to being swept away by the drama created by toxic interactions. The interconnectedness of these practices is key. For example, you cannot truly practice right speech without right understanding and right thought guiding your intentions. You cannot cultivate right effort without the foundational awareness provided by right mindfulness. Each element strengthens the others, creating a virtuous cycle of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental development. The Eightfold Path isn't a linear progression. It's a spiraling path where growth in one area naturally supports growth in others. For instance, when a toxic colleague spreads rumors challenging your peace, right understanding reminds you of their likely suffering. Right thought arises as a wish for their well-being, rather than retaliation. Right mindfulness helps you notice the anger brewing inside, allowing you to pause. Right speech guides you to address the rumor calmly or disengage wisely. Right action might be to document the behavior or limit interaction. Right effort helps you continually redirect your mind from resentment. Right concentration keeps your mind steady amidst the drama. All of these are supported by right livelihood, ensuring you maintain a working environment that generally fosters well-being. Imagine building a strong, resilient house to withstand all kinds of weather, including fierce storms. This house represents your inner self, your peace of mind, and your ability to navigate challenging situations. Right understanding is the blueprint of the house. It's the foundational knowledge of how houses and minds work, what makes them strong, and what makes them vulnerable. Without a clear blueprint, you'd build haphazardly. Right thought is choosing the right materials, opting for sturdy, durable elements instead of flimsy, temporary ones. It's the intention to build something wholesome and beneficial. Right speech is the precise measuring and cutting of each piece. You use the right words, at the right time, in the right way, to ensure they fit perfectly without causing cracks or instability. Right action is the skillful construction, laying the foundation properly, erecting the walls straight, securing the roof. It's the physical doing, ensuring your behavior aligns with the blueprint. Right livelihood is ensuring the land on which the house is built is stable and suitable, and that the surrounding environment supports its integrity. It's about choosing a healthy foundation for your daily life. Right effort is the ongoing maintenance and reinforcement, regularly checking for weaknesses, making repairs, and diligently fortifying the structure against wear and tear. It's the continuous work of nurturing positive states and abandoning negative ones. Right mindfulness is the security system of the house, sensors that detect any intrusion or disturbance the moment it arises. It's the immediate awareness of a rising emotion or thought, allowing you to address it before it becomes a major problem. Right concentration is the deep, stable foundation that anchors the entire structure, ensuring it remains unshakable, even when external winds rage. It's the unwavering focus and inner calm that supports all other aspects. If any one part of this house is weak or neglected, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. If your blueprint right understanding is faulty, your construction right action will be flawed. If your materials right thought are poor, the house won't withstand storms. If you don't maintain it right effort, it will fall into disrepair. If you lack a security system, right mindfulness, you won't know when a problem arises until it's too late. And without a solid foundation, right concentration, the whole house can collapse. Similarly, when dealing with toxic people, neglecting any aspect of the Eightfold Path leaves you exposed. If you lack right understanding, you might fall into cycles of blame. Without right mindfulness, you react impulsively. Without right speech, your attempts at boundaries might escalate conflict. The Eightfold Path is therefore a continuous journey of self-improvement and inner transformation. It provides a comprehensive roadmap for navigating the complexities of human relationships, especially the challenging ones. It empowers you not by changing the external world, but by strengthening your internal resilience, wisdom, and compassion. By diligently applying these interconnected principles, you build an unshakable inner refuge, allowing you to meet life's storms with grace and stability. This holistic understanding then naturally leads us to the importance of the company we keep and the environment we choose for our growth. Even with a deep understanding of Buddhist principles and a commitment to personal practice, navigating challenging relationships can be incredibly taxing. This is why the Buddhist path places immense emphasis on Sangha, the importance of wise association and supportive community. While much of the work of inner transformation is individual, we are not meant to walk this path alone. The people we surround ourselves with profoundly influence our thoughts, emotions, and progress. Just as a plant needs fertile soil and sunlight to thrive, our spiritual well-being benefits immensely from a nourishing environment. The Buddha often emphasized that good friends, or kalyanamitta spiritual friends, are not merely helpful, they are the whole of the holy life. This profound statement highlights that our companions, mentors, and community are not incidental to our spiritual journey, but central to it. When we are constantly exposed to negativity, criticism, or manipulation, it's like trying to row a boat against a strong current. Even if we're strong, the effort is immense, and we risk being swept away. Conversely, being surrounded by those who uplift, encourage, and share similar values is like rowing with the current. It makes the journey smoother and more joyful. The first aspect of wise association is identifying and limiting exposure to truly detrimental relationships. This is where our understanding of toxic behavior from a Buddhist perspective becomes practical. If, despite your best efforts at mindfulness, compassion, and boundary setting, a relationship consistently drains your energy, compromises your well-being, or pulls you away from your path of peace, it is skillful to reduce its influence. This isn't about abandoning people or being judgmental. It's an act of self-preservation and wise discernment. Just as you wouldn't willingly stand in a polluted environment if you had a choice, you should thoughtfully assess the emotional and mental environments you inhabit. Sometimes, true compassion for yourself means creating distance from those who are unwilling or unable to meet you in a healthy space. This might look like setting clear time limits for interactions. I can talk for 15 minutes, then I need to go. Limiting topics of conversation. I'm not going to discuss politics, gossip, your complaints today. Creating physical distance, choosing not to attend certain gatherings, or visiting less frequently. Minimizing emotional investment, detaching from the drama without becoming uncaring. In extreme cases, complete disengagement. If a relationship is truly abusive or irredeemably harmful, severing ties, while painful, can be the most compassionate act for your own well-being. The second And equally important aspect is actively seeking out uplifting and inspiring connections. This is about consciously building your Sangha, whether it's a formal spiritual community, a group of like-minded friends, or even a single mentor who embodies the qualities you aspire to. What constitutes a wise association? It's people who encourage your wholesome qualities. They see your potential, celebrate your growth, and inspire you to be your best self. Challenge you constructively. They offer honest feedback with kindness, helping you see your blind spots without tearing you down. Practice empathy and compassion. They listen, understand, and offer support when you are struggling. Share your values. They are also striving for peace, understanding, and ethical living. Uplift your spirit. You leave interactions with them feeling energized, positive, and hopeful, not drained or defeated. The power of shared practice and mutual encouragement cannot be overstated. When you are trying to cultivate patience, for instance, and you have friends who are also working on patience, you can share strategies, offer support during difficult moments, and remind each other of the deeper purpose. This collective energy creates a fertile ground for growth. It validates your experiences, reminds you that you are not alone in your struggles, and provides a sense of belonging that is deeply nourishing. In a world that often feels isolating, a strong Sangha provides a vital anchor. Let me illustrate this with a classic story from the Buddhist tradition. One day, Ananda, the Buddha's devoted attendant, came to him and said, "Lord, it seems to me that good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship is half of the holy life." The Buddha immediately corrected him, saying, "Not so, Ananda, not so. Good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship is the entire holy life. When a monk has a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, he can be expected to develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path." Ananda was surprised, and the Buddha elaborated, "It is through relying on me as a good friend that beings subject to birth are freed from birth, that beings subject to aging are freed from aging, that beings subject to death are freed from death, that beings subject to sorrow, lamentation, pain, to distress, and despair are freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, to distress, and despair." It continued, explaining that when a practitioner has a good friend who guides them, they are more likely to abandon unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome ones. The good friend helps them to develop conviction, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. The good friend helps them to listen to the Dharma, to practice mindfulness, and to develop concentration. This conversation between the Buddha and Ananda powerfully conveys the message. The holy life here can be understood as the journey towards inner peace, liberation from suffering, and skillful living. Precisely what we are exploring in navigating toxic relationships. The Buddha is saying that this entire journey is inextricably linked to the quality of our associations. Imagine you are trying to quit a habit, like excessive complaining, which often fuels negative interactions. If your closest friends are constantly complaining, it becomes incredibly difficult to break free from that pattern. They inadvertently reinforce the very behavior you are trying to overcome. They are like a strong gravitational pull keeping you stuck. However, if you seek out friends who actively practice gratitude, who focus on solutions rather than problems, and who inspire you to find the positive, your journey becomes significantly easier. Their presence, their words, and their example gently nudge you towards your goal. They are like a favorable wind filling your sails. This principle applies directly to dealing with toxic people. If you are constantly engaging with individuals who are critical, manipulative, or emotionally draining, and you don't have a counterbalance of positive support, your energy will be perpetually depleted. You might internalize their negativity, doubt yourself, or find yourself slipping back into reactive patterns despite your best intentions. Seeking out your Sangha means finding your spiritual cheerleaders and wise guides. It might involve joining a meditation group or a spiritual community, connecting with friends who prioritize personal growth and compassion, finding a mentor who embodies wisdom and resilience, engaging in online forums or discussions that foster positive connection around these topics. Even simply spending more time with family members who genuinely uplift you. This isn't about creating an echo chamber, devoid of all challenge. True Sangha can still offer constructive criticism and challenging perspectives, but it does so from a place of care and wisdom, with the intention of helping you grow, not tearing you down. The presence of such a community provides a vital source of resilience when facing difficult relationships. It reminds you of your inherent worth, supports your efforts, and helps you maintain perspective when the world outside feels chaotic. While community is vital, ultimately, the journey to true peace must culminate in finding refuge within oneself, which is the final aspect we will explore. We've journeyed through understanding, suffering, releasing the need to control, practicing mindfulness, recognizing our vulnerabilities, extending loving kindness, setting wise boundaries, embracing non-attachment, and valuing supportive community. Now, we arrive at the culmination of this path, cultivating inner refuge. This is the profound realization that true peace and security don't come from external circumstances, from the absence of toxic people, or from perfectly managed relationships. Instead, they arise from within, from an unshakable inner calm, independent of external chaos. In Buddhism, the concept of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is fundamental. It means turning to these three jewels as guiding lights on the path. However, at a deeper level, these external refuges serve to illuminate and strengthen our capacity to find refuge within our own enlightened nature. The Buddha taught that each of us has the potential for awakening, for clarity, and for boundless compassion. We already possess the seeds of peace. The practice is simply to uncover and nurture them. Cultivating inner refuge means developing an unshakable inner calm that persists even when the world outside is tumultuous. Imagine a storm raging on the surface of an ocean, with massive waves, strong winds, and heavy rain. But deep beneath the surface, the ocean remains still, calm, and undisturbed. This deep stillness is your inner refuge. When a toxic person unleashes their negativity, it's like the storm on the surface. Our minds might get caught in the waves of emotion, but if we have cultivated inner refuge, we know how to dive beneath the surface, to connect with that deep, calm center within ourselves. This inner calm is not a state of blissful ignorance. It's a state of profound stability and clarity, allowing us to witness the storm without being swallowed by it. This leads to the profound freedom that comes from knowing our inner worth and wisdom. when our peace depends on others' approval, behavior, or absence, we are perpetually vulnerable. Our self-esteem becomes a fragile thing, easily shattered by a harsh word or a dismissive gesture. But when we build our refuge within, based on our inherent potential for wisdom and compassion, our sense of worth becomes unassailable. We know who we are, independent of external validation. This deep self-acceptance empowers us to face criticism without crumbling, to withstand manipulation without being swayed, and to maintain our integrity even when challenged. Our wisdom, cultivated through mindfulness and insight, becomes our unwavering guide, showing us the path to skillful action and true liberation. Ultimately, cultivating inner refuge is about living from a place of peace, even amidst difficulty. It's not about escaping problems, but about developing the capacity to meet them with equanimity and resilience. When your peace is truly internal, you carry it with you wherever you go. The toxic colleague at work, the difficult family member at home, the frustrating stranger on the street, they may still present challenges, but they no longer have the power to steal your fundamental peace. You become like the lotus flower, which grows beautifully and unstained from the mud. You can engage with the world, including its difficult aspects, without being defiled or consumed by them. Let's explore a story that encapsulates the essence of inner refuge. There once was a revered Zen master who lived in a small, humble hut at the foot of a towering mountain. The mountain was known for its formidable presence, its harsh, jagged peaks often shrouded in mist and battered by severe storms. People from the nearby village would often seek refuge with the master, complaining about the relentless winds, the biting cold, and the frequent landslides that afflicted the mountain. They spoke of the mountain as a symbol of their life struggles, harsh and unforgiving. One particularly violent storm raged for days, shaking the very foundations of the village houses. When it finally subsided, the villagers rushed to the master's hut, expecting to find him battered and weary. Instead, they found him sitting in his usual serene posture, his face radiating an inexplicable calm, his hut completely undisturbed. "Master," they exclaimed, "how is it possible? The storm was terrible, the mountain was writhing in its fury. How could you remain so peaceful, so untouched?" The master smiled gently and gestured towards the mountain. "Did you notice the storm on the mountain's peak?" he asked. "Yes, Master, it was violent, terrifying," they replied. "And did you notice the trees on its slopes, bending and breaking under the wind's assault?" "Indeed, Master, many fell." "And what about the deep caves and caverns within the mountain?" he queried. The villagers paused. "We did not think of them, Master." "Ah," the master said, his voice soft but resonant. While the storm raged on the surface and the trees on the slopes suffered, deep within the mountain, in its very core, there was stillness. The rock remained unmoving, undisturbed by the winds or the rain. The caverns were calm and quiet. He looked directly at them, his eyes full of compassion. "Your lives are like this mountain. The toxic people, the conflicts, the criticisms, the external chaos. These are the storms on the surface, the winds lashing at the trees on your slopes. It is natural to feel their impact, to be shaken, but each of you, too, has a deep, quiet cave within, a core of wisdom, compassion, and stillness that the external storms cannot reach. When you are swept away by the winds of anger or lashed by the rain of resentment, you are clinging to the surface, identifying with the suffering on the slopes. My practice is simply to remember that deep cave within, to always return to it. The storm may rage, but I know where my true refuge lies. I do not try to stop the wind or calm the rain on the mountain's surface. I simply choose to reside in the stillness of its core. This story is a profound metaphor for cultivating inner refuge. The mountain represents your entire being, your life with its inevitable challenges. The storms and lashing winds are the toxic people and difficult situations that arise. Our common tendency is to identify with the surface, the agitated thoughts, the churning emotions, the external drama. We get caught in the writhing fury of the surface storm. However, the Master reminds us that we possess a deep, quiet cave within. This is our inner refuge, our inherent Buddha nature, our capacity for peace, wisdom, and compassion that is untouched by external circumstances. When we cultivate mindfulness and all the practices of the Eightfold Path, we are not trying to magically stop the storm, change the toxic person. We are learning to consciously move our awareness from the turbulent surface to the undisturbed core within. This doesn't mean becoming aloof or disconnected. The Master was still aware of the storm. He simply didn't let it penetrate his core. Similarly, we remain aware of challenging dynamics, but we don't allow them to shatter our fundamental peace. We can still feel compassion for the suffering of others, but we are no longer pulled into their drama. Living from this place of inner refuge means that criticism passes through you rather than lodging in your heart. You hear it. You might even process it for any grain of truth, but it doesn't diminish your inherent worth. Manipulation loses its power because you are not seeking external validation or clinging to specific outcomes that the manipulator might withhold. Conflict can be met with calm because your response comes from a place of wisdom and stability, not reactivity. Peace is not a fleeting state that depends on others behaving perfectly. It becomes your default mode, a wellspring you can always return to. Cultivating inner refuge is the ultimate act of self-love and liberation. It's the realization that while others may choose to create storms, you alone choose whether to dwell in the tempest or rest in the quiet depths of your own being. This profound understanding empowers you to walk through life with an unwavering sense of peace, clarity, and genuine freedom, transforming every challenge into an opportunity for deeper awakening. This journey, rooted in ancient wisdom, offers a tangible path to reclaiming your serenity in a chaotic world. To truly navigate challenging relationships from a Buddhist perspective, it's essential to ground ourselves in the very foundation of the Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths. These truths offer a profound framework for understanding suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path to liberation. When applied to our interactions with toxic people, they move us beyond superficial reactions and into a deeper, more transformative understanding. The first noble truth, dukkha, the truth of suffering. The first truth states that life is suffering, dukkha. This isn't a pessimistic declaration, but a realistic observation. It acknowledges that dissatisfaction, pain, stress, anxiety, and a general sense of unease are inherent parts of the human experience. When we encounter toxic relationships, this truth becomes acutely clear. The pervasive discomfort, the emotional drain, the moments of intense anger or deep sadness, these are all manifestations of dukkha. In the context of dealing with difficult people, Dukkha arises in many forms. Physical dukkha, the tension in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach, the headaches that might accompany stressful interactions. Emotional dukkha, the anger, frustration, resentment, fear, sadness, and anxiety that surface. Mental dukkha, the endless rumination, the self-doubt, the confusion, the feeling of being trapped in a cycle of negativity. Dukkha of change, viparinama dukkha, the pain that comes from things not staying as we want them, or people not behaving as we expect. We suffer when the toxic person doesn't change, when the situation doesn't resolve itself in our favor, or when our peaceful aspirations are disrupted. Dukkha of conditioned states, sankhara dukkha, the subtle unease that comes from simply existing in an environment influenced by their negativity, even when there isn't an overt conflict. Acknowledging this suffering is the first step. We stop pretending it doesn't exist or blaming ourselves for feeling it. We simply observe, yes, this interaction causes me suffering. This honest recognition creates a space for inquiry, leading us to the second truth, the second noble truth, samudaya, the truth of the origin of suffering. The second truth points to the origin or cause of suffering, samudaya, craving and clinging. It's not the toxic person themselves who directly cause our suffering, but our attachment and clinging to certain outcomes, expectations, and perceptions related to them. This is a radical shift in perspective. If we believe the other person is the cause of our suffering, we are powerless, because we cannot control them. But if our craving and clinging are the cause, then liberation becomes possible, because we can work with our own mind. How does craving and clinging manifest in toxic relationships? Craving for approval, validation. We suffer when a critical person withholds praise or actively dismisses us, because we crave their validation. Clinging to control. We suffer when we cannot control the other person's behavior, their words, or the outcome of an interaction. We cling to the idea that they should be different, or that the situation should go our way. Attachment to reputation, image. If someone gossips or slanders us, we suffer because we cling to our desired image or reputation. Craving for peace, absence of conflict. We suffer when a volatile person disrupts our peace, because we crave a conflict-free environment and cling to the idea that it must always be present. Attachment to our narratives. We cling to the story we've built about the toxic person. They always do this. They're impossible. And this narrative fuels our resentment and limits our ability to respond freshly. Clinging to self-identity. When a difficult person challenges our sense of self-e.g., making us feel incompetent or unlovable, we suffer because we cling to a fixed, positive self-image. Understanding this truth means recognizing that the discomfort is amplified by our internal grasping. The other person's actions are simply the trigger that exposes our own attachments. The third noble truth, nirodha, the truth of the cessation of suffering. The third truth offers immense hope. The cessation of suffering, nirodha, is possible if suffering arises from craving and clinging. Then the cessation of suffering comes from the cessation of that craving and clinging. This doesn't mean the toxic person magically disappears or changes. It means that their actions no longer have the power to disturb our inner peace, because we have released our attachment to their behavior or to a specific outcome. When we cease clinging, we no longer depend on their approval for our self-worth. We let go of the futile struggle to control their actions. We release the emotional burden of resentment and anger. We find a spaciousness in our mind, even in their presence. This is not a passive resignation, but an active liberation. It's the moment we realize, as we discussed with detachment, that our peace is our own responsibility and not contingent on external factors. The fourth noble truth, Magga, the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. Finally, the fourth truth provides the path to the cessation of suffering. Magga, the noble eightfold path. This is the practical roadmap, the how-to guide for achieving the cessation of suffering that we explored in the previous section. Each element of the Eightfold Path directly addresses the craving and clinging that cause dukkha in relationships. Right understanding helps us see the roots of suffering in ourselves and others, enabling us to stop clinging to erroneous views. Right thought cultivates wholesome intentions, counteracting the craving for revenge or ill will. Right speech helps us communicate skillfully, avoiding the clinging to harsh words or destructive arguments. Right action guides us in ethical conduct, preventing actions that cause harm to ourselves or others. Breaking cycles of reactivity. Right livelihood encourages us to create environments that support our well-being, reducing our exposure to conditions that foster clinging. Right effort is the diligent practice of letting go of unwholesome states like attachment and aversion, and cultivating wholesome ones like patience and compassion. Right mindfulness gives us the awareness to catch our clinging as it arises, allowing us to pause and choose a different response. Right concentration develops the mental stability needed to sustain non-clinging amidst chaos. Let's consider a simple analogy to bring the Four Noble Truths to life in the context of a toxic situation. Imagine you are trying to enjoy a beautiful picnic in a park, but a swarm of mosquitoes keeps buzzing around you, biting and irritating you. First, noble truth suffering. The bites and the incessant buzzing are your dukkha. You feel annoyed, itchy, and your peaceful picnic is ruined. This is the direct experience of suffering caused by the mosquitoes, the toxic person's behavior. You acknowledge, yes, these mosquitoes are causing me discomfort. Second noble truth, origin of suffering. You realize that your suffering isn't just the mosquitoes, but your desire for them to not be there, and you're clinging to the idea of a perfectly mosquito-free picnic. You keep slapping at them, getting more agitated because you crave a specific outcome, their absence, and cling to your expectation of undisturbed peace. Your internal resistance to their presence is fueling your frustration. You might also be clinging to the story that this picnic should be perfect. Third, noble truth, cessation of suffering. You have a moment of insight. If you can let go of your craving for a mosquito-free picnic, and you're clinging to the idea of controlling the mosquitoes, then your suffering from them will cease. The mosquitoes might still be there, but they will no longer have the power to ruin your peace. You realize that your inner tranquility doesn't depend on their absence. Fourth, noble truth path to cessation of suffering. So, what's the path? Right understanding. You understand that mosquitoes are simply acting according to their nature. They are not personally trying to torment you. They exist. They bite. Right thought, you cultivate thoughts of non-aversion towards the mosquitoes, or at least a practical approach rather than vengeful thoughts. Right speech, action. You don't yell at the mosquitoes futile. Instead, you skillfully apply mosquito repellent, setting a boundary, or perhaps move to a different spot where they are less prevalent, creating distance. You might cover yourself with clothing, protecting your space. Right effort. You continuously reapply the repellent or reinforce your boundaries, diligently working to keep your space clear. You resist the urge to get angry when one still bites. Right mindfulness. You notice the moment a mosquito buzzes or lands, allowing you to react consciously. E.g., brushing it away calmly, rather than instinctively swatting in frustration. Right concentration. You keep your focus on your picnic, on your food, on the pleasant sounds of the park, rather than being constantly distracted by the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes might still be present in the park, but they no longer cause you profound suffering because you've stopped craving their absence and clinging to a reality where they don't exist. You've skillfully navigated their presence without letting them destroy your inner peace. Applying the Four Noble Truths to toxic relationships transforms our entire approach. It empowers us to recognize that while others' behaviors can be unpleasant or harmful, our deepest suffering often stems from our internal reaction, our craving for things to be different, our clinging to illusions of control, and our attachment to outcomes. By diligently following the Eightfold Path, we systematically dismantle these attachments, paving the way for a profound and lasting inner freedom. Even amidst the most challenging interpersonal dynamics, this fundamental understanding of suffering and its roots prepares us for a deeper dive into the concept of karma and our own role in these dynamics. After understanding how our craving and clinging contribute to our suffering through the lens of the Four Noble Truths, we naturally arrive at the profound Buddhist concept of karma kama, often misunderstood as mere fate or divine retribution. Karma, in Buddhism, refers to action driven by intention. It encompasses our physical, verbal, and mental actions. This understanding is crucial when dealing with toxic people because it invites us to examine our own role, however subtle, in the dynamic, and to recognize the profound interconnectedness of all beings. The core principle of karma is that every intentional action we take, whether wholesome or unwholesome, creates effects that will eventually ripen. These effects might manifest immediately, or they might unfold over time. This isn't a punitive system, but a natural law of cause and effect, just as planting a mango seed will yield mangoes, not apples. Skillful actions will lead to wholesome results, and unskillful actions will lead to unwholesome ones. When we are in a relationship with a person we label toxic, it's easy to see them as the sole perpetrator and ourselves as the innocent victim, while their unskillful actions certainly cause suffering. The teaching of karma encourages us to look at the interplay within the dynamic. How do our actions, words, and even thoughts contribute to or perpetuate the cycle? This isn't about blaming ourselves for someone else's behavior, but about empowering ourselves to recognize our agency and break free from reactive patterns. Consider how our past actions and present responses shape the dynamic with others. Perhaps in previous interactions, we responded with anger, defensiveness, or passive aggression. These responses, themselves driven by intention however unconscious, can subtly reinforce the other person's behavior or trigger further unskillful actions from them. If we consistently engage in a shouting match, we are, in a karmic sense, contributing to the shouting match dynamic. If we constantly enable someone's manipulative behavior, we contribute to the karmic landscape where manipulation seems effective. This doesn't mean we deserve the toxic behavior, but it acknowledges that our own choices create ripples. The ripple effect of our internal state on external interactions is a powerful aspect of karma. Our thoughts and intentions, even unspoken, carry energy. If we harbor deep resentment, anger, or fear towards a toxic person. That internal state can subtly influence our words, our body language, and even the atmosphere we create around us. This, in turn, can unconsciously invite certain reactions from others, including perpetuating the very patterns we wish to escape. Conversely, cultivating inner states of patience, compassion, and equanimity, as we've discussed, can shift the dynamic, sometimes subtly, sometimes profoundly. When we change our side of the equation, the overall equation must change. This brings us to the liberating realization of taking ownership of our part in the relationship dance. This isn't about guilt or self-blame. It's about self-empowerment. If we are solely focused on changing the other person, we are stuck. But if we recognize that our own karmic imprints, our own habitual reactions, and our own current intentions contribute to the dynamic, then we have a powerful lever for change. We can choose to respond differently, to act with more wisdom, to speak with more compassion, to cultivate more wholesome thoughts. This active choice to generate wholesome karma, even in the face of unwholesome actions from others, is our path to liberation. Let's consider an analogy that illustrates the principle of karma and its ripple effect. Imagine throwing a stone into a perfectly still pond. The stone represents your intentional action, your words, your deeds, your thoughts. The initial splash is the immediate, direct effect of your action. The ripples that spread outwards across the pond's surface, touching everything in their path, represent the far-reaching and often unforeseen consequences of your action. These ripples interact with other ripples, amplifying or diminishing each other. The water in the pond represents the interconnected web of existence, including all other beings and circumstances. Now, apply this to a toxic relationship. Let's say a toxic person. Person A throws a stone of criticism or aggression, an unskillful action into the pond of your interaction. Your immediate reaction might be to throw back a stone of defensiveness, anger, or resentment. This is your intentional action. This second stone creates its own splash and ripples. These ripples of anger and defensiveness interact with person A's initial ripples of criticism, often amplifying the negativity. The pond of your relationship becomes increasingly disturbed, with more and more chaotic ripples colliding. If your habitual response is to always throw back a stone of anger, then you are consistently contributing to a turbulent pond dynamic. You are creating the karmic conditions for continued conflict. This is your part in the dance. However, if you understand karma, you have a choice. When person A throws their stone of criticism, instead of immediately throwing back a stone of anger, you could choose to not react with a counter stone. You might practice mindfulness, observe the splash without throwing your own stone. You might choose to respond with right speech, perhaps a stone of calm assertion or compassionate understanding. This action creates different ripples, ripples of clarity or peace, or even just non-engagement. These new ripples interact differently with person A's initial ripples. They might begin to calm the pond instead of further agitating it. Or, if person A continues to throw stones, your pond remains relatively calm because your own actions are not adding to the chaos. You are not generating counter ripples of negativity. The analogy highlights that while you cannot control the initial stone thrown by person A, you can control whether you throw a counter stone and what kind of stone you choose to throw. The pond, the relationship dynamic, is not just shaped by one person's actions, but by the continuous interaction of everyone's choices. This perspective is incredibly empowering. It shifts the focus from external blame to internal responsibility. It encourages us to look at our own patterns. Do I consistently react with anger when criticized? This is a karmic pattern of aversion. Do I enable manipulative behavior by always giving in? This could be a karmic pattern of excessive craving for peace or fear of conflict. Do I mentally replay grievances, fueling resentment? This is a mental karma that poisons my own mind. By becoming aware of these patterns, we gain the power to change them. We can choose to plant different seeds. When we respond to toxic behavior with patience, clear boundaries, or even compassionate detachment, we are generating wholesome karma. We are creating different ripples in the pond. This doesn't guarantee that the other person will change immediately, but it guarantees that our experience of the dynamic will shift. We are no longer bound by the old karmic patterns of reaction. This understanding of karma deepens our sense of interconnectedness. We realize that we are not isolated islands, but part of a vast web of cause and effect. Every thought, word, and action we produce sends ripples into this web, influencing our own future experiences and the experiences of others. This profound insight into our own agency and the laws of the universe lays the groundwork for understanding the ultimate nature of reality itself, leading us to the concept of emptiness and the release of fixed views. We've explored how karma highlights our interconnectedness and agency. Now, we delve into one of Buddhism's most profound and often misunderstood concepts, emptiness, sunyata. Far from meaning nothingness or void. Emptiness, in this context, refers to the idea that all phenomena, including people and relationships, lack inherent, independent existence. They are not fixed, solid, or unchanging entities, but are dependently arisen, constantly shifting, and devoid of a separate, inherent self. Understanding this profound truth is liberating because it helps us to release our rigid, fixed views, which are a major source of our suffering in toxic relationships. Our minds naturally categorize and label everything. We create mental boxes. This is a good person. That is a bad person. This relationship is toxic. That situation is hopeless. We then cling to these labels as if they are absolute truths, ignoring the fluidity and complexity of reality. When we apply these fixed views to people, especially those we label toxic, we lock them into a rigid identity. We stop seeing them as dynamic beings capable of change, even if that change is slow or not towards our desired outcome. We stop seeing the myriad factors that contribute to their behavior, and instead, just see the label. The teaching of emptiness helps us to understand how our labels and fixed views create suffering when we firmly believe this person is toxic. We create a solid, unmoving barrier in our minds. Every action they take, every word they utter, is filtered through this lens, reinforcing our judgment and deepening our aversion. If they do something positive, we might dismiss it as an anomaly or a manipulative tactic because it doesn't fit our rigid toxic label. This clinging to our fixed view prevents us from responding with flexibility, compassion, or wisdom. It traps us in a cycle of reactivity to our idea of the person, rather than to the person themselves in the present moment. Seeing the fluidity and impermanence of all phenomena, including relationship dynamics, is crucial. Just as a cloud is empty of inherent cloudness because it depends on water vapor, temperature, and wind, so too is a toxic person, empty of inherent toxicness. Their behavior arises dependently on their past experiences, their current mental states, anger, fear, delusion, their physiological condition, and the specific circumstances of the interaction. If any of those conditions change, their behavior can change. The relationship dynamic itself is also fluid. It is a continuous co-creation. When we rigidly define it as toxic, we ignore its potential for transformation, even if that transformation is simply a change in our internal experience of it. Therefore, emptiness is about releasing the rigidity of this person is always bad or this situation is hopeless. It's not about denying that harmful actions occur or that situations are difficult. It's about seeing that these phenomena are not solid, permanent, or independently existing. They are made up of countless contributing factors, and they are constantly in flux. When we grasp onto a fixed view, we deny this fundamental truth of impermanence and dependent arising. This grasping creates suffering because reality inevitably defies our rigid mental constructs. When we grasp onto a fixed view of someone as toxic, we often assume their actions are deliberately aimed at us, or that they are intrinsically malicious. Emptiness helps us to see that their actions are often simply a manifestation of their own suffering and conditioned patterns, arising dependently on their internal landscape. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it depersonalizes it for us. It allows us to view their actions with greater clarity, seeing them as phenomena arising and passing, rather than as fixed attacks. Consider this analogy to illuminate the concept of emptiness in relationships. Imagine you are walking through a desert and you see what appears to be a shimmering, inviting oasis in the distance, a crystal clear lake surrounded by lush palm trees. You desperately need water, so you hurry towards it, filled with hope. The image is so vivid, so real in your mind. However, as you get closer, the image begins to distort, shimmer, and eventually, it completely disappears. What you saw was a mirage, an optical illusion created by light bending through layers of hot air. There was no actual oasis there, no inherent oasisness to cling to. Your suffering, the disappointment, the continued thirst arose from your clinging to the idea of a fixed, independently existing oasis. Now, let's apply this to a toxic person or relationship. When we label someone as toxic or define a relationship as hopeless, we often create a mental mirage of that person or situation. We see a toxic person as a solid, fixed entity of badness, incapable of change, inherently malicious. This is our mental mirage of them. We then react to this mirage, not the fluid, complex person. We project all our past negative experiences onto this fixed image. Every time they speak, we hear it through the filter of this toxic person is speaking. We might ignore any moments of kindness or neutrality because they don't fit our mirage. Our suffering arises from clinging to this fixed view. This mirage, we cling to the idea that they are inherently toxic, and therefore, our suffering is inevitable when we interact with them. We also cling to the idea that the situation is inherently hopeless, and therefore, we feel trapped. The teaching of emptiness invites us to approach this mirage with wisdom, not blind belief. When you see the toxic person's behavior, Instead of clinging to the mirage of inherently evil person, you can ask, what conditions are giving rise to this behavior right now? What are the contributing factors? You realize that their toxicness is not an inherent, unchanging quality, but is dependently arisen. It arises from their craving, their ignorance, their past conditioning, their present emotional state, the specific circumstances. If those conditions change, their behavior can also change. Just as the mirage disappears with changing atmospheric conditions, you understand that the label toxic is a useful shorthand, but not an absolute truth. It's a concept, not the ultimate reality of the person. By seeing the person as empty of inherent, fixed toxicness, you don't deny their harmful actions, but you release your clinging to the rigid label. This release of fixed views is profoundly liberating. It allows you to respond freshly to each interaction, rather than automatically reacting to your pre-existing mental mirage. You can see moments of neutrality, or even kindness, rather than filtering them out. It fosters greater compassion, because you see the suffering that gives rise to their unskillful actions, rather than just seeing a malicious other. It creates spaciousness in your own mind. When you stop clinging to rigid categories, your mind becomes more flexible and open. You are no longer trapped by your own mental constructs. It helps you avoid despair. If someone is inherently toxic, then there's no hope. But if their toxicness is dependently arisen and empty of inherent existence, then there is always the possibility of change, even if that change is small or occurs within your perspective rather than theirs. Releasing fixed views through the understanding of emptiness is not about ignoring reality or denying harm. It is about seeing reality as it truly is: fluid, interconnected, and impermanent. It's about letting go of the heavy baggage of rigid labels and judgments, allowing your mind to be more expansive and free. This profound insight lays the groundwork for applying practical perfections in our daily lives, moving us towards a path of generosity and patience. Having explored the profound concept of emptiness and the fluidity of phenomena, we now move to a more active, practical application of Buddhist wisdom, the 6 perfections paramitas. These are not just abstract virtues, but qualities that fully enlightened beings embody and that we cultivate on our path to liberation. When applied to dealing with toxic people, the paramitas offer concrete ways to transform challenging interactions into opportunities for profound inner growth. They represent a path of active engagement with life, not passive avoidance. The 6 perfections are generosity, dana paramita. This isn't just about giving material possessions. In the context of relationships, generosity means offering kindness, understanding, and even our presence, when skillful, without expectation of return. It's about giving the benefit of the doubt, offering a listening ear without judgment, or giving the space that someone needs. Application to toxic people. This can be incredibly challenging. It doesn't mean giving them limitless access to exploit you. Instead, it might mean generosity of understanding, recognizing that their difficult behavior stems from their own suffering and ignorance, as discussed in Section 2E. This is a generous understanding of their predicament. Even if you don't condone their actions, generosity of patience, giving them space to be as they are, without immediately trying to fix or change them. Generosity of non-engagement. Sometimes, the most generous act is to not feed the negativity, to withdraw your attention from their drama, thereby not giving them the fuel they unconsciously seek. This protects your peace and also avoids enabling harmful patterns. Generosity of spirit, maintaining an open heart as much as possible through metta practice, even when facing their negativity. Morality, ethical conduct, sila paramita. This refers to living by ethical principles that prevent harm to oneself and others. It's about consciously choosing wholesome actions and refraining from unwholesome ones like lying, harsh speech, or slander. Application to toxic people. Sila guides our interactions, right speech and right action, as explored in Section 2. Lu. This means setting boundaries clearly and kindly, without resorting to anger, manipulation, or passive aggression, not retaliating. If someone is verbally abusive, Sila guides us not to respond in kind, thereby breaking the cycle of negativity. This protects our own karma and integrity, upholding integrity, maintaining our own ethical standards. Even when others fall short, this builds self-respect and trust. Patience, khasanti paramita. This is the ability to endure difficulty, insult, and suffering without becoming angry, upset, or losing inner peace. It's not passive resignation, but active, enduring equanimity. Application to toxic people. This is often the most directly relevant perfection. Enduring provocation. When a difficult person tries to bait you, patience means resisting the urge to react immediately. It's the ability to pause and breathe through the discomfort, accepting impermanence, understanding that their current difficult phase or your current challenging situation is not permanent. Patience allows you to endure the now, knowing it will change. Cultivating resilience, developing the mental fortitude to withstand repeated exposure to negativity without being internalizing it. This is directly linked to the practice of equanimity upekkha from Section 2. Shawu, effort, diligence, virya paramita. This is the joyful exertion in wholesome activities and the vigorous abandonment of unwholesome ones. It's the sustained energy and enthusiasm for practice. Application to toxic people, sustained practice, diligently applying mindfulness, metta, and boundary-setting techniques every time a challenging interaction arises, not just when it's easy. Preventing unwholesome thoughts, actively redirecting the mind away from rumination, resentment, or planning revenge as discussed in Right Effort. Section 2. Shalu. Cultivating wholesome states, actively generating compassion, patience, and clarity, even when it feels difficult. It's the working out of our spiritual muscles. Meditation, concentration, dhyana paramita. This refers to developing deep states of mental stability, focus, and absorption, leading to clarity and peace. Application to toxic people, inner stability, the ability to remain centered and grounded, even amidst chaotic or emotionally charged interactions. This allows you to listen without judgment or react impulsively. Clarity of mind. A concentrated mind is less prone to distortion, allowing you to see the situation more clearly and respond with greater discernment. Returning to the breath, using meditation techniques like breath awareness in the moment of challenge to regain composure. Wisdom prajna paramita. This is the ultimate perfection, the deep insight into the true nature of reality, particularly emptiness and dependent origination. It is the understanding that guides all other perfections. Application to toxic people, seeing beyond labels, understanding that toxic is a label, and the person is empty of inherent, fixed toxicness. Section 2. Shasan. This radically shifts your perception, recognizing suffering, seeing that their unskillful actions stem from their own suffering and ignorance. Section 2. E. Which fosters compassion, understanding impermanence and non-self, realizing that the difficult dynamic is not fixed, and that clinging to a rigid self or other causes suffering. Sections 2. R. Shutsi. Discerning skillful action, knowing when to engage, when to disengage, when to speak, and when to remain silent, based on what truly leads to peace and welfare. Imagine a warrior, but not a warrior of aggression. This is a spiritual warrior who trains not for external battle, but for inner strength and peace. Each of the 6 perfections becomes a vital training exercise for this warrior, generosity Dana. The warrior learns to use their resources wisely. They don't waste their energy on futile attacks or hold grudges. Instead, they generously offer understanding, space, and a non-reactive presence. This is like a warrior who conserves their strength for strategic defense rather than reckless offense. Morality, Sila. The warrior adheres to a strict code of conduct. They never resort to underhanded tactics, lies, or unnecessary cruelty. Even when provoked, their weapons are always clean and ethical, ensuring their actions are always aligned with their highest values. This maintains their integrity and inner peace, regardless of the opponent's tactics. Patience, Kasanti. This warrior trains to endure. When an opponent, a toxic interaction, unleashes a barrage of insults or provocations, the warrior stands firm, unmoving. They don't flinch, don't retaliate impulsively. They breathe deeply, letting the blows pass without internalizing them. This patience is their unyielding shield. They know the storm will pass. Effort, Virya. The warrior is diligently disciplined. They don't just practice when it's easy. They exert consistent effort in their training. Day in and day out, they continuously refine their skills of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. When fatigue or discouragement sets in, they redouble their efforts, knowing that sustained exertion builds true resilience. Meditation, Dhyana. The warrior cultivates a calm, focused mind. Before any engagement, they center themselves, quiet their internal chatter, and develop unwavering concentration. This allows them to see the situation clearly, without distortion, and to respond precisely and effectively. Rather than being swept away by fear or anger, their mind becomes like a laser, piercing through confusion. Wisdom, Prajna. This is the warrior's ultimate strategy. They don't just react to the surface. They understand the true nature of the opponent, that they are not inherently fixed or solid, but are manifestations of suffering. They see the impermanence of the conflict itself. This wisdom allows them to know when to engage, when to disengage, when to be firm, and when to be gentle. It's the discernment that ensures all their actions are ultimately liberating, not binding. Each of these perfections builds upon and enhances the others. A warrior without patience would quickly lose their calm. A warrior without wisdom might fight battles that are unwinnable or unnecessary. A warrior without sustained effort would never develop the skills needed. Applying the 6 perfections when dealing with toxic people transforms the dynamic from a source of suffering into a powerful training ground for spiritual growth. Instead of feeling victimized, You become an active participant in your own liberation. You learn to respond skillfully, not react blindly. You cultivate qualities that bring inner peace and strength, regardless of the external chaos. This practice moves us towards a profound state of equanimity, where our inner balance remains unshaken. We've now explored various active practices and profound understandings, from cultivating compassion to applying the 6 perfections. Now we arrive at a cornerstone of Buddhist liberation, upekkha, or equanimity. This is the culmination of our inner work, representing an unshaken balance of mind that is not disturbed by the ebb and flow of life, especially in the face of challenging people and circumstances. It is a state of profound inner stability that is often misunderstood as indifference, but is, in fact, quite the opposite. Upekkha is balanced awareness, not indifference. Indifference, as discussed earlier, is a lack of caring, a shutting down of emotion. Equanimity, however, means feeling fully, yet remaining unattached to the outcomes or the fluctuating nature of those feelings. It's about maintaining a clear, steady awareness amidst both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, without being swayed by them. When faced with toxic behavior, equanimity allows us to witness the drama without getting pulled into it. Like a calm lake reflecting a stormy sky, the storm is there, but the lake's depth remains still. The essence of equanimity lies in maintaining inner stability amidst external turbulence. Imagine a ship on a rough sea. The waves crash, the wind howls, but a well-designed ship, with its ballast and strong keel, remains upright and stable. Similarly, our minds, when cultivated with equanimity, can weather the storms of criticism, to blame, or manipulation without capsizing. We don't deny the existence of the storm, but we don't allow it to fundamentally disturb our inner equilibrium. This means acknowledging feelings like anger or frustration when they arise, but not identifying with them or allowing them to dictate our actions. There is anger, rather than I am angry. This practice is deeply rooted in the recognition of the impermanence of all phenomena and emotions. Every feeling, every thought, every external event, including the actions of a toxic person, arisis, exists for a time and then passes away. When we cling to pleasant experiences or resist unpleasant ones, we suffer. Equanimity allows us to observe this constant flux with an even mind, understanding that everything is subject to change. The hurtful comment will pass. The difficult situation will evolve. By not clinging to the desire for things to be different than they are, we release a tremendous source of suffering. Ultimately, cultivating equanimity allows us to respond skillfully rather than react impulsively. Without equanimity, our responses are often driven by immediate emotional triggers. Anger leads to harsh words. Fear leads to withdrawal. Frustration leads to blame. With equanimity, however, we create that space between stimulus and response, as discussed in section 2. San, in that space, we can access our wisdom, compassion, and ethical understanding, the eightfold path and paramitas, and choose a response that is truly beneficial, both for ourselves and for the situation, rather than being merely reactive. This might mean speaking a boundary calmly, choosing silence, or simply observing without internalizing. Let me share a classic story that profoundly illustrates the essence of upekkha. In a mountainous region, there stood a magnificent, ancient mountain. For centuries, it had witnessed countless seasons. Summers brought blazing sun, winters brought biting blizzards, springs brought torrential rains, and autumns brought fierce winds. Villagers living nearby would often complain about the weather. The sun is too harsh, they would lament. The snow is too deep. The wind's too strong. Yet, the mountain itself remained utterly undisturbed. When the sun shone, it basked in the warmth, its rocks absorbing the heat. When the blizzards raged, snow accumulated on its slopes, but its colossal weight was unaffected. When the rains poured, water carved paths down its sides, but the mountain did not shrink. When the winds howled, trees on its surface bent and swayed, but the mountain's core stood firm. Unyielding, the mountain did not desire the sun to always shine, nor did it resent the storms. It simply was. It allowed the elements to act upon its surface. Knowing its vast, ancient body remained intrinsically unmovable, deeply rooted in the earth. It welcomed all seasons, holding everything with a quiet, majestic presence. It was neither elated by the warmth nor distressed by the cold. It possessed an inherent, unshakable balance. One day, a young, anxious traveler came to a wise sage who lived at the foot of this mountain. "Master," the traveler sighed, "my mind is constantly tormented by life's difficulties. When people criticize me, I am devastated. When things don't go my way, I am filled with despair. How can I find peace amidst such a turbulent world?" The sage pointed to the mountain. "Look at the mountain, my child. It experiences all the weather of life, the praise of the sun, the blame of the storm, the gain of lush growth, the loss of falling rocks. Yet, does the mountain weep? Does it rage? Does it complain? No. Master," the traveler admitted, "the mountain practices upekkha." The sage explained, "It teaches us to be like its core, profoundly rooted, unmoving, and balanced. No matter what happens on its surface, your life, your relationships, are like the weather upon your own mountain. When a toxic person criticizes you, it is like the strong wind trying to erode your slopes. When they praise you, it is like the warm sun. If you identify only with the surface, with the changing weather, you will be constantly tossed about, complaining or rejoicing based on external conditions. But if you can connect with your inner core, that deep, unshakable stability within, then the weather of life, even the most severe storms caused by others, will no longer disturb your fundamental peace. You allow the winds to blow, the rain to fall, the sun to shine, but your core remains untouched, balanced, serene. This analogy beautifully encapsulates the essence of equanimity. The mountain is your inner self, your consciousness. The weather represents all the external conditions and internal reactions. The toxic person's words, their actions, your immediate feelings of anger or sadness, their occasional moments of pleasantness, or their consistent negativity. Our common tendency is to be like the villagers, constantly reacting to the weather, complaining about the storms and craving the sunshine. When a toxic person unleashes a torrent of criticism, It's like a blizzard. If we lack equanimity, we become the complaining villager, letting the blizzard penetrate our very being, making us feel cold, misérable, and overwhelmed. We identify with the storm, thinking I am miserable because of this. But with upekkha, we learn to be like the mountain's core. We don't deny the blizzard, we acknowledge it. There is intense criticism right now. My body feels tense. My mind is generating angry thoughts. But instead of letting it penetrate our core, we remain vast, unmoving, balanced. We allow the storm to play out on the surface of our awareness, knowing that our fundamental peace is deeper, untouched. This means when toxic words come, you hear them. You recognize them, but they don't pierce your core. You observe the initial ripple of emotion, but you don't jump into the river of reactivity. When manipulative tactics are used, you see them clearly, understand their nature, but you don't get emotionally entangled. Your balance allows you to respond strategically, not impulsively. When things don't change, you accept the reality of the situation without resentment. You don't cling to the expectation that the weather must always be sunny. You find peace in what is, not what you wish it to be. The consistent practice of upekkha builds this inner resilience. It allows us to face the unpredictable and often challenging nature of human relationships with a profound sense of inner freedom. It's the ultimate skill for maintaining our well-being in a world that will never be perfectly calm. This deep, unwavering balance then empowers us to engage in right effort, actively transforming our mental landscape, which is the next crucial step. We've discussed equanimity as an unshaken balance amidst external turbulence. Now, we delve into how to actively cultivate that balance through right effort, samavayama. This aspect of the Eightfold Path is about consciously and diligently directing our energy towards thoughts, words, and actions that lead to peace and well-being, while simultaneously working to abandon those that lead to suffering. It's the active, ongoing practice of spiritual gardening, weeding out what's harmful and nurturing what's beneficial. In the context of dealing with toxic people, right effort is not a passive wish but an active commitment to managing our own mind and responses. It recognizes that our internal landscape is not fixed, but can be shaped by consistent, mindful exertion. This effort is applied in 4 specific ways, preventing unwholesome states from arising. This is the proactive guard. It means being vigilant and aware of tendencies within ourselves that could lead to suffering when triggered by a toxic interaction. For instance, if you know that criticism often sparks anger in you, right effort involves catching the first flicker of that anger and consciously choosing not to feed it. This might mean pausing, taking a breath, or redirecting your attention. It's about recognizing the early warning signs of destructive patterns before they gain momentum, abandoning unwholesome states that have arisen despite our best efforts. Unwholesome states like anger, resentment, fear, or self-pity will inevitably arise when dealing with difficult people. Right effort here means actively working to release their grip. It's not about suppressing them, which can be harmful, but about seeing them for what they are, temporary mental phenomena, and gently letting them go. This might involve mindfulness techniques, like noting the emotion, anger until it subsides, or practicing metta-loving kindness to counteract ill will. It's the diligent work of untangling yourself from the thorny bush of negative emotions, cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the creative, positive aspect of right effort. It means actively nurturing qualities like patience, compassion, understanding, kindness, and equanimity within ourselves, even if these qualities don't come naturally in the face of a toxic person. Right effort means intentionally bringing them to mind, practicing them through meditation, and consciously applying them in interactions. It's like planting seeds of beautiful flowers in our mental garden, maintaining wholesome states that have arisen once you experience moments of peace, clarity, or compassion. Right effort involves diligently sustaining them. This means consistently reinforcing practices that lead to these states so they become more robust and accessible. It's about not taking your inner peace for granted, but actively protecting and strengthening it against erosion. It's ensuring your mental garden continues to flourish, preventing weeds from taking root again. This constant, conscious direction of energy is what allows us to break free from old, reactive patterns. When someone is habitually toxic, they often trigger habitual reactions in us. Right effort is the deliberate interruption of these cycles, creating new, more skillful responses. It transforms passive suffering into active liberation. Let's illustrate right effort with the analogy of a diligent farmer tending their garden. Imagine a farmer who cultivates a vegetable patch. This patch represents their mind and their experience of relationships. In this garden, two types of plants can grow: wholesome plants, like fresh vegetables and fruits, representing peace, compassion, clarity, and unwholesome plants like weeds and thorns, representing anger, resentment, fear, and attachment, preventing unwholesome states from arising. The farmer is diligent in preparing the soil and building fences around the garden. They ensure the ground is not too acidic or too fertile for weeds, and they put up barriers to prevent invasive species like seeds of anger or judgment from others from easily entering. They are vigilant, quickly spotting any stray weed seeds and removing them before they can sprout. This is like proactively recognizing your emotional triggers and being mindful of your initial thoughts before they take root, abandoning unwholesome states that have arisen despite the farmer's best efforts. Some weeds will inevitably sprout. When they do, the farmer doesn't ignore them or let them grow rampant. They diligently pull out the weeds as soon as they appear, root and all. This can be hard work, requiring persistence. This is like actively working to let go of anger, resentment, or obsessive thoughts once they've arisen. You don't let them fester. You gently but firmly pull them from your mind, cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. The farmer doesn't just clear weeds, they actively plant the seeds of wholesome crops. They sow carrots, tomatoes, and herbs, providing them with water and sunlight. They envision the bountiful harvest. This is like actively developing qualities you want more of, such as patience, forgiveness, or understanding, even when they don't feel natural to you. In a difficult situation, you consciously choose to nurture these seeds in your mind, maintaining wholesome states that have arisen. Once the wholesome crops begin to grow, the farmer doesn't abandon them. They continue to water, fertilize, and protect them from pests. They ensure the healthy plants thrive and produce abundant fruit. This is like consistently practicing mindfulness, metta, and equanimity, strengthening your capacity for peace and compassion so that these wholesome states become deeply ingrained and resilient. You don't just achieve a moment of peace, and then stop practicing, you maintain it. Applying this analogy to managing toxic relationships. When a toxic person makes a cutting remark, an unwholesome seed of anger or defensiveness might be sown in your mind. Without right effort, you might let that seed sprout into a full-blown weed of resentment. You might replay the remark endlessly, nourish feelings of bitterness, and allow it to choke out your inner peace. Your mental garden becomes overgrown with painful weeds. With right effort, you might prevent the initial seed from taking deep root by immediately noticing the thought and choosing to turn your attention to your breath. Mindfulness. If the weed of anger does sprout, you apply effort to abandon it. You recognize it, label it anger, and consciously choose not to dwell on it. You pull it out. Simultaneously, you cultivate a wholesome plant like compassion. You actively remind yourself that the other person might be suffering, or you intentionally wish them well through metta. This is like planting a rose bush where a weed once stood. And finally, you maintain your wholesome states. After a successful calm response, you reinforce the feeling of peace, remembering that this is the path you want to continue cultivating. Right effort is a continuous, moment-to-moment practice. It's the active choice to be the conscious gardener of your mind, rather than allowing your inner landscape to be overtaken by unwholesome tendencies, especially those stirred by difficult external interactions. It's the diligent application of all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path. Through consistent right effort, we create a mind that is increasingly resilient, peaceful, and unburdened by the actions of others, which leads us to understand the nature of our attachments and how they contribute to our perceived self in relationships. We've explored right effort as the active shaping of our mental landscape. Now, we delve into a core Buddhist teaching that underpins much of our suffering in relationships, non-attachment, and the 5 aggregates. Our pain often comes from clinging to a fixed self or fixed ideas about others. By understanding how our experience of self is constructed moment by moment, we can loosen the grip of attachment and find profound freedom, especially when dealing with toxic dynamics. In Buddhism, the self we perceive as solid, continuous, and independent is not seen as an ultimate reality. Instead, it's understood as a constantly changing collection of interdependent processes, categorized into 5 aggregate skandhas. These aggregates are the components of all our sensory and mental experiences, and they make up what we mistakenly identify as I or mine. They are form rupa. This includes our physical body and all material phenomena. When we interact with a toxic person, this aggregate relates to their physical presence, their gestures, their facial expressions, the observable aspects. Feeling Vedana. This is the raw sensation of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or neutrality that arises from contact with phenomena. When a toxic comment is made, we immediately feel an unpleasant sensation, e.g., a pang of hurt, a surge of irritation. Perception sana. This is the ability to recognize and label things. After feeling the unpleasant sensation, we perceive the comment as criticism, insult, or attack. We identify the person that's name being mean again. Mental formations, sanghara. This is a vast category encompassing all volitional activities, thoughts, intentions, judgments, biases, and conditioned responses. This is where our ingrained reactions to the toxic person reside. Our anger, resentment, fear, our desire to retaliate or withdraw. It's the story we build around them and ourselves in response. Consciousness, vijnana. This is the basic awareness or knowing that arises in conjunction with the other aggregates. It's the knowing of sights, sounds, smells, taste, touches, and mental objects, thoughts, emotions. It allows us to be aware of the toxic person's words, our feelings, and our perceptions of them. The crucial point here is that none of these aggregates, individually or collectively, constitute a permanent, unchanging self. They are constantly arising and passing away. Our suffering arises when we cling to these aggregates as me, mina, or myself, especially when they change, which they inevitably do, due to impermanence. How does this apply to toxic relationships? Clinging to a fixed self in relation to the other. We might cling to the identity of the one who is always right, the victim, the one who tries hard but is never appreciated. When a toxic person's behavior challenges this fixed self-image, e.g., they make us feel incompetent. We suffer because our clung-to identity is threatened. We identify so strongly with the form of our body, the feelings of hurt, the perceptions of unfairness, and the mental formations of our self-worth, that any attack on these feels like an attack on our very being. Clinging to a fixed idea of the other, we cling to the perception of the toxic person as an unchangeably negative entity. This rigid view, a mental formation, prevents us from seeing their moments of vulnerability or recognizing that their behavior also arises from a collection of impermanent aggregates, not a fixed evil core. We suffer because our fixed view clashes with the fluidity of reality. Clinging to the perfect relationship or perfect outcome. We suffer when the reality of the relationship, the forms, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness involved doesn't match our idealized vision. We are attached to a specific kind of pleasant feeling or perception of the relationship. And when toxic behavior disrupts this, our attachment causes pain. Releasing attachment to the idea of a perfect relationship or a perfect outcome is a profound liberation. It's not about settling for less. It's about seeing reality as it is. Relationships are dynamic, messy, and constantly evolving. There will be pleasant moments and unpleasant moments. When we stop clinging to an idealized version, we free ourselves from the endless cycle of disappointment. We can appreciate the moments of connection, manage the moments of difficulty, and accept the impermanence of it all. Let's use a very tangible analogy to understand how clinging to the aggregates creates suffering and how non-attachment brings freedom. Imagine a meticulously built, beautiful sandcastle on a beach. It has intricate towers, perfectly sculpted walls, and a grand entrance. You have spent hours creating it, pouring your effort and creativity into every detail. The sandcastle itself is like the form aggregate. It's a physical structure, the pleasure and satisfaction you feel as you build it, and when you admire its beauty, are the feeling aggregate, your recognition of it as my masterpiece. The best sandcastle on the beach is the perception aggregate, all your thoughts, intentions, and desires related to it, your pride, your hope that it lasts, your desire for others to admire it, are the mental formations. Your awareness of the sandcastle, your seeing, feeling, and thinking about it is consciousness. You are deeply attached to this sandcastle. You identify with it. This is my creation. It reflects me. Now, imagine the tide starts to come in. Slowly, inevitably, the waves begin to lap at the base of your sandcastle. As the first waves touch it, you feel unpleasant feelings, dukkha. You perceive this as a threat to your sandcastle, your masterpiece. Your mental formations kick in. This isn't fair. I worked so hard. The waves shouldn't be doing this. You cling desperately to the idea of the sandcastle remaining perfect and intact. You might even get angry at the ocean. Your consciousness is solely focused on the diminishing castle, filled with distress. Your suffering here arises not from the sandcastle itself, nor even solely from the waves, but from your clinging to the idea that the sandcastle should be permanent, that it is yours in an enduring way, and that your happiness is contingent on its continued existence. Now, imagine an experienced beachgoer who understands the nature of sand and tides. They build a sandcastle with joy and creativity, putting their best effort into it, but they understand that it is made of sand, that the tide will always come in, and that its existence is inherently impermanent. They do not cling to it. When the waves come, they might feel a touch of sadness, but they don't experience intense suffering. They simply observe the sandcastle dissolving, form changing, acknowledge the impermanence. Their mental formations might be, the tide is coming. It was beautiful while it lasted. Now it will return to the ocean. Their consciousness is calm, not agitated by desperate clinging. This beachgoer is practicing non-attachment to the 5 aggregates that make up the sandcastle. They enjoyed its creation and its presence, but they didn't cling to its permanence or identify their self with its lasting form. They understood its emptiness of inherent, unchanging existence. Applying this to a toxic relationship, we often cling to the sandcastle of our self-image in relation to the other person, or the sandcastle of an ideal relationship dynamic. When a toxic person criticizes us, they are like the wave hitting our self-image sandcastle. If we cling to the idea that I am a competent person and should never be criticized, our suffering is immense. We identify with the form of our body tensing, the feeling of hurt, the perception of insult, and the mental formations of being a victim. Similarly, if we cling to the sandcastle of this relationship should be harmonious and supportive, then the waves of conflict and manipulation cause great distress. We are attached to a specific kind of feeling and perception of the relationship, understanding the 5 aggregates and their impermanent, non-self nature helps us to deconstruct this clinging. When the toxic comment comes, we notice the form tension, the feeling unpleasantness, the perception label of criticism, the mental formation, anger, defensiveness, and the consciousness of all this. Then, we remind ourselves, this tension is just form. It's impermanent. This feeling is just a feeling. It will pass. This perception is just a label, not ultimate reality. These thoughts are just mental formations. They are not me. By seeing each aggregate as impermanent, unsatisfactory because it changes, and not truly self, not a fixed entity to cling to, we loosen our grip. The criticism might still be unpleasant, but it no longer attacks a self that we are desperately clinging to. It is simply a phenomenon arising and passing. This practice allows us to be in relationships, to experience their ups and downs, but without the suffering that comes from clinging. we can participate fully, put in effort, and engage with care, but always with the wisdom that everything is impermanent and devoid of a fixed, separate self. This profound wisdom is key to navigating life's challenges with true freedom, including the complex journey of forgiveness. Having understood the fluidity of self and other through the lens of the 5 aggregates and non-attachment, we now approach one of the most transformative, yet often misunderstood, practices in navigating toxic relationships: forgiveness. In the context of Buddhist teachings, forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior, forgetting past wrongs, or reconciling with an unrepentant perpetrator. Instead, it is primarily an act of self-liberation, releasing the burden of anger, resentment, and the desire for retribution. For our own sake, our conventional understanding of forgiveness often traps us. We believe that forgiving someone means absolving them of responsibility, letting them off the hook, or even forgetting the pain they caused. This can feel deeply unjust, especially when the harm has been significant or repeated. However, from a Buddhist perspective, holding on to resentment is like a self-inflicted wound. It's akin to drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The anger, bitterness, and desire for revenge consume our inner peace, cloud our judgment, and bind us to the very person and past event we wish to escape. The practice of forgiveness is fundamentally about releasing the grip of these corrosive emotions. It's about consciously choosing to loosen the chains of ill will that bind us to the past and to the person who caused us pain. This doesn't mean denying the reality of the harm or pretending it didn't happen. It means acknowledging the pain, witnessing the anger, and then, with intention, choosing to let go of the mental and emotional burden associated with it. This is a process, not a single event. It requires sustained effort and compassion, particularly for oneself. Often, the first step in this process is forgiving oneself for perceived failures or reactions. When dealing with toxic people, we might blame ourselves for not setting boundaries sooner, for reacting emotionally, for staying in a difficult situation, or for not being strong enough. This self-blame is another form of resentment, turned inward, and it is equally corrosive. Forgiving oneself means acknowledging that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time, and that all beings make mistakes. It is an act of self-compassion that creates the fertile ground for extending forgiveness outwards. Understanding that holding on to resentment harms us more than the other person is a key motivator. The toxic individual may be completely unaware of the internal torment they are causing you. They may be consumed by their own suffering, oblivious to the impact of their actions. Your resentment, while aimed at them, functions as a poison in your system. It affects your sleep, your mood, your other relationships, and your overall well-being. By choosing to forgive, you are cutting the energetic cord that ties you to their negativity. You are taking back your power and reclaiming your inner peace. Furthermore, forgiveness in Buddhism often arises from a deep understanding of karma and dependent origination. We understand that the other person's harmful actions stem from their own ignorance and suffering their karmic conditioning. They are, in a sense, victims of their own unskillful patterns. While this doesn't excuse their behavior, it cultivates a compassionate perspective that allows us to see beyond the surface act to the underlying causes. When we see the suffering that drives their actions, it becomes easier to release our own resentment. knowing that their karma will ripen for them according to their deeds. We don't need to be the instrument of their suffering or hold on to their karmic debt. Let's illustrate the liberating power of forgiveness with a simple analogy. Imagine a person embarking on a long, arduous journey through a dense forest. As they begin their trek, they encounter someone who has thrown a large, heavy rock onto their path, causing them to stumble and hurt their leg. The traveler is furious. They pick up the heavy rock, intending to carry it with them until they can find the person who threw it, so they can throw it back, or at least show them the burden they've caused. The traveler continues their journey, but with immense difficulty. The rock is incredibly heavy. Their injured leg throbs with every step. Their progress is agonizingly slow. The weight of the rock causes constant pain in their back and shoulders. Their thoughts are consumed by anger towards the person who threw the rock, by resentment for the pain, and by fantasies of retribution. The beautiful forest around them, the birdsong, the fresh air, all go unnoticed because their entire being is focused on the heavy, painful burden they carry. Hours turn into days, days into weeks. The traveler is exhausted, bitter, and miserable. The person who threw the rock is nowhere to be found, completely unaware of the suffering they have caused and the burden the traveler is carrying. The rock is now covered in mud and grime, even heavier and more repulsive. Yet the traveler clings to it, believing it is the only way to hold the other person accountable. Then, one day, the traveler sits down, utterly depleted. They look at the rock, covered in their sweat and tears, and a realization dawns. This rock is harming me far more than it is harming the one who threw it. They are not even aware I am carrying it. This burden, this pain, is now entirely my own choice. With a deep sigh, the traveler consciously, intentionally, drops the heavy rock. The immediate sensation is one of immense relief. The burden is gone from their shoulders. The pain in their back begins to subside. Their thoughts, no longer consumed by anger and revenge, start to clear. They can breathe freely. They can look up and see the sunlight filtering through the trees, hear the gentle rustling of leaves, and feel the soft earth beneath their feet. Their journey becomes lighter, freer, and more joyful. They are still aware that the rock was thrown, and their leg is still injured. But the suffering caused by carrying the burden of resentment has ceased. This heavy rock is your resentment, anger, and desire for retribution towards a toxic person. The person who threw the rock, the toxic individual, may be completely oblivious to the burden you are carrying. They might have moved on, forgotten their action, or be caught in their own cycles of suffering, entirely unaffected by your internal turmoil, your continuous internal replaying of their words, your fantasies of arguments, your simmering anger. These are all ways you keep picking up and carrying that heavy rock. It drains your energy, consumes your thoughts, and prevents you from experiencing peace and joy in your own life. It harms you directly and profoundly. Forgiveness, in the Buddhist sense, is the act of consciously dropping that rock. It's the moment of profound realization that this burden is harming me. It doesn't mean you forget the rock was thrown, or that the person who threw it is excused from responsibility for their actions. Their karma will unfold. It simply means you release your attachment to holding on to the pain and the desire for revenge. This act of dropping the rock is not a passive surrender. It's an active, courageous choice. It's a choice to prioritize your own well-being and inner freedom over clinging to righteous indignation or a desire for external justice. When you forgive, you liberate yourself from the prison of resentment. This process can be challenging, especially for deep wounds. It often involves acknowledging the pain fully. You cannot release what you don't acknowledge. Cultivating metta for yourself, being kind and compassionate to your own suffering, understanding the other's suffering, seeing the rock thrower as a suffering being, caught in their own patterns, allows for a softening of your heart, making it easier to drop the rock. Repeating the intention, forgiveness is often a continuous process. Revisiting the intention to let go whenever the old resentment arises. By practicing forgiveness, you are not absolving the toxic person. You are freeing yourself. You are cutting the ties that bind you to their negativity, allowing you to move forward on your path with lightness, wisdom, and a renewed sense of peace. This liberation through forgiveness allows us to find a middle way in our engagement with others, avoiding extremes and finding balance. We've covered many profound aspects of navigating challenging relationships, culminating in the liberating practice of forgiveness. Now, let's bring these threads together under the overarching Buddhist principle of the middle way. This isn't just about moderation. It's about finding the balanced path that avoids the pitfalls of extremes, neither complete avoidance and disengagement, nor complete entanglement and absorption with toxic dynamics. It's the path of skillful navigation that preserves one's well-being and fosters genuine peace. In the context of dealing with difficult people, the middle way means steering clear of two unskillful extremes. Extreme of aversion, withdrawal. This is the tendency to completely shut down, flee, or maintain rigid, inflexible distance from any perceived toxic person or situation. While setting boundaries and creating distance can be skillful and necessary, an extreme of aversion leads to isolation, fear, and a hardening of the heart. It prevents us from learning, growing, or developing compassion. It's like building a fortress around ourselves, hoping no negativity can ever penetrate. But in doing so, we also cut ourselves off from genuine connection and the messy reality of human interaction. Extreme of clinging, entanglement. This is the tendency to get completely absorbed, overly involved, or deeply enmeshed in the toxic person's drama or negativity. This often comes from a misguided sense of responsibility, a desire to fix them, a craving for their approval, or an inability to detach emotionally. It leads to constant emotional drain, anxiety, and the loss of our own sense of self. It's like constantly jumping into the turbulent river, hoping to control the current, only to be swept away. The middle way, then, is about finding the balanced approach that preserves one's well-being and fosters peace. It's about skillful engagement, which means knowing when to lean in with compassion and understanding, and when to pull back with self-preservation and wise detachment. This requires constant discernment, flexibility, and a deep connection to our inner wisdom. It's not a rigid rule, but a dynamic, adaptive way of living. So, how do we apply the middle way to interactions with challenging individuals? Neither too much engagement, nor too little. It means engaging with empathy where it's beneficial and safe, but disengaging where it's harmful. For example, if a family member complains incessantly, the middle way isn't to cut them off entirely extreme aversion, nor to listen for hours until you're drained extreme entanglement. It might be to listen for a short, defined period, offer a few compassionate words, and then skillfully change the subject or excuse yourself. Neither passive acceptance nor aggressive confrontation. It's about assertiveness with compassion, right speech. Section 2. Loke. It avoids being a doormat, passive, and also avoids attacking or blaming, aggressive. It's a calm, clear statement of your needs and boundaries, without anger or fear, balancing compassion with wisdom. True compassion isn't enabling. The middle way recognizes that sometimes the most compassionate act for all involved is to set a firm boundary, even if it feels difficult. It's the wisdom to know when helping becomes harming yourself or even the other person by enabling their unskillful patterns. Flexibility and adaptability in different situations. The middle way is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It recognizes that different relationships and different moments require different responses. What's skillful with a casual acquaintance might be different from a close family member. What's appropriate when you're calm might not be appropriate when you're feeling highly reactive. It's about continually assessing the situation and your internal state. The Buddha himself used a beautiful analogy to explain the middle way, particularly in relation to the practice of meditation. There was once a monk named Sona, who had been a musician before becoming a monk. He was practicing with great diligence, but he was struggling to attain deep states of peace. He was either pushing himself too hard, leading to exhaustion and frustration, or being too lax, leading to distraction and lack of progress. He felt like he was constantly failing. One day, the Buddha observed Sona's struggle and called him over. "Sona," the Buddha asked, "when you were a musician, what did you know about the string of a lute?" Sona replied, "Lord, if the string of a lute were too taut, it would snap and would not produce a pleasant sound. If it were too loose, it would not produce a pleasant sound either, and if it were neither too taut nor too loose, Sona, but evenly stretched, then it would produce a pleasant sound and be fit for playing. Wouldn't it?" "Yes, Lord," Sona agreed. The Buddha then said, "In the same way, Sona, too much effort leads to agitation, and too little effort leads to laziness. So, you should apply your effort in moderation. Understand the balance of your faculties, and there you will find success." This analogy of tuning a lute is a perfect metaphor for the middle way in all aspects of life, including our engagement with toxic people. The lute represents our inner being, our mind, and our well-being. The strings are our engagement with life and relationships, particularly the challenging ones. If our string of engagement with a toxic person is too taut, the extreme of clinging, entanglement, it means we are too emotionally invested, trying too hard to control or fix them, constantly fighting, arguing, or absorbing their negativity, overly sensitive to their actions, letting every word sting, just like a too tight lute string. This approach leads to snapping, emotional burnout, resentment, anxiety, and a complete loss of inner peace. The sound of our life becomes jarring and unpleasant. If our string is too loose, the extreme of aversion, withdrawal, it means we are completely disengaged, apathetic, or rigidly avoiding all difficult people. Even when some interaction is unavoidable or potentially beneficial, building insurmountable walls, cutting ourselves off from the possibility of growth or genuine connection, suppressing our feelings, leading to emotional numbness, just like a too loose lute string. This approach also fails to produce a pleasant sound. We become listless, uninspired, and miss opportunities to practice compassion and resilience. Our life may lack vibrancy and meaning. The middle way is like the evenly stretched lute string. It means we engage with discernment. We choose our battles wisely. We offer compassion and kindness where it's appropriate and effective, not too loose. Sit firm. Compassionate boundaries. We protect our energy and mental health without resorting to harshness or extreme avoidance. Not too taut. Respond with flexibility. We adapt our approach based on the situation and the person, rather than adhering to rigid rules. Maintain inner balance. Our equanimity. Section 2:15 allows us to remain centered. Even when the string is being plucked, we are engaged, but not entangled. Prioritize our peace. Our ultimate goal is to produce a pleasant sound in our own lives, which means not sacrificing our well-being for a futile struggle. For example, if you have a toxic relative who always dominates conversations at family gatherings, the too taut approach would be to constantly interrupt them, argue with them, or ruminate afterwards about how angry you are, trying to make them change. This drains your energy and creates conflict. The too loose approach would be to completely avoid all family gatherings, thereby isolating yourself and missing out on connections with other loved ones. The middle way might involve attending the gathering with mindful intention, listening patiently for a short time when the relative speaks, then skillfully changing the subject or moving to speak with someone else, and, if directly addressed, offering a brief, non-committal response and redirecting. You are present, but not entangled. You preserve your peace while still engaging in life. The middle way is a dynamic dance, not a static position. It requires constant awareness, self-reflection, and a willingness to adjust. By continuously finding this balance, we ensure that our interactions, even with toxic people, become opportunities for growth and the cultivation of genuine inner peace, leading us to our ultimate goal, living with awakened awareness. We've traversed a profound journey through Buddhist wisdom, from understanding the nature of suffering to finding balance through the middle way. Now, we arrive at the culmination of this path, living with awakened awareness. This isn't a final destination to be reached and then forgotten, but an ongoing integration of all these teachings into a continuous state of mindful presence in our daily lives. It's about seeing things as they truly are, free from the distortions of delusion, and realizing that peace is not the absence of problems, but the ability to meet them with an unshakable inner calm. Awakened awareness, or what is often referred to as enlightenment in its broadest sense, is simply seeing things as they truly are, free from delusion. It's peeling back the layers of our preconceived notions, our conditioned responses, and our attachments to reveal the fundamental reality of impermanence, non-self, and suffering. When we apply this to toxic relationships, it means seeing the person not as a fixed villain, but as a dynamic collection of aggregates, propelled by their own suffering and ignorance. It means seeing the interaction not as a personal attack, but as a dependently arisen phenomenon. This clarity, born from deep insight, naturally leads to greater compassion and skillful action. This state of awakened awareness manifests as an ongoing practice of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom in every interaction. It's not something you turn on and off. When you encounter a challenging person, your mind automatically defaults to observing your breath, noticing your rising emotions, recalling your intention to offer metta, or choosing skillful speech. These practices become second nature, like a well-worn path. You become like a master gardener who intuitively knows which plants need water, which need weeding, and how to protect the garden from pests. You don't have to consciously consult a textbook. The wisdom is embodied. A critical realization that comes with awakened awareness is that peace is not the absence of problems, but the ability to meet them with inner calm. The world will always present challenges. Toxic people, in some form, will always exist. Life is inherently messy, unpredictable, and imperfect. To wait for a perfectly peaceful external environment before cultivating inner peace is to wait forever. Awakened awareness teaches us that true peace resides within us, independent of external conditions. It's the ability to be the still point in a turning world, to remain centered even when chaos erupts around us. This journey is a continuous one of spiritual growth and liberation. There isn't a magical endpoint where all difficulties vanish. Instead, our capacity to meet those difficulties with wisdom and compassion deepens. Each challenging interaction becomes an opportunity to refine our practice, to strengthen our inner refuge, and to peel away another layer of delusion. It's a continuous process of learning, adapting, and growing, moving closer and closer to that state of profound freedom and ease. Let's conclude with an analogy that beautifully summarizes the essence of living with awakened awareness amidst toxic circumstances. Imagine a magnificent lotus flower growing in a murky pond. The pond's bottom is deep with thick, dark mud, filled with impurities and decaying matter. Yet, from this very mud, the lotus stem arises, passing through the murky water, and then, unblemished and pristine, the flower blooms beautifully on the surface, its petals completely unsullied by the mud or the dirty water from which it grew. It draws nourishment from the mud, but remains fundamentally separate and pure. The murky pond with its deep, dark mud represents the world with its imperfections, its difficulty, its toxic people, and the often unwholesome conditions we encounter. It's the realm of suffering, anger, greed, and delusion. The lotus stem represents our journey on the Buddhist path, our conscious effort to cultivate wholesome qualities amidst these challenging conditions. It's our practice of mindfulness, compassion, setting boundaries, letting go, and developing wisdom. The unblemished, pristine lotus flower, blooming on the surface, represents the state of awakened awareness, of true inner peace and liberation. It is beautiful, radiant, and pure, despite having originated from the mud. It signifies that our peace is not contingent on the external environment being perfectly clean or free of mud. Applying this to living with awakened awareness and dealing with toxic people, the mud toxic people and situations. You acknowledge the presence of toxic people and difficult situations. You don't deny the mud of their unskillful behavior, their negativity, or the challenges they present. You see the mud for what it is, a source of potential suffering. The stem, your practice, your diligent engagement with the Buddhist teachings is like the lotus stem. Each mindful breath, each act of compassion, each wisely set boundary, each moment of letting go, each effort to release resentment, these are the fibers of the stem growing upwards. They draw lessons and strength nourishment from the very challenges you face. Rather than being defeated by them, you use the mud of difficulty as fertilizer for your own growth. The unstained flower awakened awareness and peace, despite growing from the mud. The lotus flower remains pure and unsullied. Similarly, even when you are immersed in environments with toxic people, your awakened awareness allows you to remain fundamentally peaceful and undisturbed. You witness the negativity, but you are not stained by it. You can interact, but you don't absorb their harmful energy. Your inner peace blossoms, radiant and independent of the external messiness. This analogy teaches us that peace is possible, even in imperfection. You don't need to eliminate all toxic people from your life to find peace. Like the lotus, you can find profound peace and beauty within challenging circumstances. Challenges are opportunities for growth. The mud provides the nourishment. Difficult interactions become catalysts for developing patience, compassion, wisdom, and resilience. Without the mud, there would be no lotus. Inner purity is possible amidst external chaos. Awakened awareness allows you to maintain your inner clarity and calm. No matter how turbulent the external environment, your peace is an internal choice, not an external condition. The path is active, not passive. The lotus stem actively pushes through the mud and water to reach the light. Similarly, our practice requires continuous effort and engagement to cultivate our inner qualities. Living with awakened awareness means embodying the lotus. It means consciously choosing to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness in every moment, allowing these qualities to lift you above the mud of difficult interactions. It means understanding that true liberation isn't about escaping reality, but about transforming our relationship to it. It is the continuous unfolding of our inherent capacity for peace and freedom, enabling us to walk through the world with lightness, clarity, and an ever-deepening sense of equanimity. This timeless wisdom of the Buddha truly offers a profound and practical way to find your serenity amidst the relentless pace and pressure of modern life. We've now completed a comprehensive exploration of how Buddhist wisdom offers a powerful and practical path to navigating the complexities of toxic relationships and finding profound inner peace amidst the pressures of modern life. Our journey began by redefining toxic, not as an inherent evil in others, but as actions rooted in their suffering and delusion. This fundamental shift in perspective laid the groundwork for understanding that true liberation doesn't come from controlling external circumstances, but from transforming our internal landscape. We delved into the profound truth that our own suffering often arises from our clinging to expectations and our illusion of control over others. The practice of mindfulness emerged as our essential tool, creating the vital space between stimulus and response, allowing us to observe our reactions without immediately being swept away. We bravely turned the mirror inward, recognizing how challenging interactions often reveal our own vulnerabilities, prompting us to take responsibility for our emotional well-being. The journey continued with the transformative power of metta-loving kindness, showing us how extending compassion, even to those who cause us pain, primarily frees us from the corrosive burden of resentment. This compassion, however, is tempered by wisdom, guiding us in wise speech and skillful action to set healthy boundaries, an act of self-preservation that is both firm and compassionate. We learned the crucial difference between detachment and indifference, embracing non-attachment as a path to inner freedom, releasing the grip of clinging to rigid outcomes. We then integrated these practices into the holistic framework of the Eightfold Path, seeing how each aspect contributes to skillful interaction and inner growth. We explored the deep wisdom of the Four Noble Truths, understanding that our suffering is rooted in craving and clinging, and the path to peace lies in releasing these attachments. The concepts of karma and interconnectedness illuminated our own subtle role in relationship dynamics, empowering us to create wholesome ripples. Emptiness freed us from rigid, fixed views of others, allowing for greater flexibility and compassion. The Six Perfections offered practical virtues to cultivate, from generosity and patience to wisdom. Equanimity emerged as the unshaken balance, allowing us to remain serene amidst external turbulence. And right effort provided the diligence needed to continuously abandon unwholesome states and cultivate wholesome ones. The core message woven throughout this journey is clear. The peace you seek is not in changing others, but in transforming yourself. Asterisk, asterisk. True serenity is an internal state, a refuge you cultivate within your own being, independent of how others choose to behave. It is the profound realization that while life will always present its muddy ponds and turbulent waves, you can, like the lotus flower, rise above them, blooming pure and unstained. This is not a passive philosophy. It is an empowering call to action. It offers a tangible way to reclaim your autonomy and well-being. By diligently applying these timeless Buddhist principles, cultivating mindfulness, practicing compassion, setting wise boundaries, and fostering non-attachment, you will find yourself increasingly resilient, less reactive, and more deeply at peace. You will learn to meet life's inevitable challenges not with fear or frustration, but with an awakened awareness that transforms obstacles into opportunities for profound inner growth. Embrace this journey and discover the boundless wellspring of peace that resides within you, ready to illuminate your path through even the most complex relationships.